We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey?
Here.
Councilmember Bolin?
Here.
Councilmember Mwambe?
Here.
Councilmember Emig?
Present.
Councilmember Painter?
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Here.
Councilmember Black? Councilmember Craybill?
Here.
Councilmember Bray?
Here.
Mayor Renner?
Here. Thank you very much. And at this point, we're going to ask, because of some logistics, not because that there's any preferencing of anyone's perspectives or opinion versus another, but because Mr. Isaac Thorne has to be in Normal, and unlike Dan Brady, he can't be at two places at the same time. So I do need could I have a motion, and let me read this, pursuant to Chapter 2, Section 85C of the Bloomington City Code, to change the placement of public comment, so the public comment will take place immediately after Agenda Item 5, the presentation and discussion of an update regarding Connect Transit.
Yes, what you said. I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Second. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin?
Yes.
Councilmember Mwambe?
Yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Black?
Yes.
Councilmember Craybill?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray?
Yes.
Mayor Renner?
Yes. Well, I don't vote on this. No, thank you. Mr. Thorne, if you'd come forward. Thank you. And thank you for coming, and thank you for trying to appear at two places at once on one evening.
Yes, thank you very much for making that
I'm sorry, Mayor, do we still have to approve the minutes? We, item 4 was approving the minutes from the last committee of the whole?
We put this above public comment.
Okay, so we moved this forward, not that back. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just
Correct.
I thought we...
Yeah, so we will do public comment and then the minutes. Yeah.
Thank you for the mayor and council members for allowing me to speak to you tonight. What I want to address tonight is the recent fare and route changes, our community engagement sessions that led up to the changes for the possibility of the council rejecting Connect Transit's budget. We are not a perfect system. We are a good system, and we are striving for improvements and to become better. The board has kept the fares at $1 for fixed route and $2 for Connect Mobility for the last 12 years since 2007. And we have been prudent with stretching tax dollars and keeping the fares low for our customers. Connect Transit is not a taxing authority. We don't have the ability to levy property taxes for operating or capital expenses. We are relying on state, federal, and local subsidies, as well as fare revenue to provide for our budget. Some of the transit agencies around Connect Transit in Springfield, Champaign, those agencies are taxing authorities and are able to levy property taxes. One of the agencies in Illinois that's similar to Connect Transit is Rockford Transit Agency. They are not a taxing authority, and their fares have been $1.50 and $3 since 2009. So it gives you a good reference between Connect Transit and this other agency that has similar structures. The board did approve a 25% or 25-cent increase in fares that's been delayed until October 1st. The board also approved a value card for ADA paratransit service that will replace the unlimited 30-day pass. 80% of our customers do not benefit from a 30-day unlimited pass because they don't take at least 32 and a half trips to break even on that pass. That pass is $65. Connect Transit is one of the only agencies in Illinois that has an unlimited 30-day ADA paratransit service or pass for that service, and one of the few nationally that actually offers it. The value card that we propose and the board voted on will benefit and give a discount to all of our 88 paratransit customers in the community. In terms of the route changes, before voting on the route changes and fare increase, Connect Transit staff held 14 engagement sessions in the community. We also held 2 public hearings also on the proposals. The approved route changes will add frequency to 2 identified transit corridors in this community on West Market Avenue and on East College Avenue, where transit-dependent customers live and use transit. Both the Lime and Express will provide better service to transit-dependent customers in these corridors. And we did, unfortunately, eliminate service the Olive Route on West Orlando Avenue. However, the board and staff has heard from these customers that they're not able to walk the half mile to the bus stop on Main Street. So we are proposing a solution that's going to be a board recommendation on June 25th to address that situation to continue providing service on West Orlando Avenue. In terms of the budget, if the council rejects our budget, it has potential to be devastating for Connect. We have already submitted the board-approved budget to Illinois Department of Transportation through the Downstate Operating Assistance Program process, and it typically takes IDOT 6 months to execute the contract. So usually, if we submit it in April, we get it back in October. And then we're able to draw down funds or get repayment or reimbursement from IDOT for our expenses. If the budget is rejected by this council, we then start the process over again because legally we don't have a budget. And even if we got a budget approved by August, it'd be January, February before IDOT would execute that, and we'd be able to get reimbursed for expenses. And that would probably, we'd have to eliminate or suspend service at that point in time, sometime in December probably. So it would be devastating not only for our customers, our employees, because we would not provide the service that our customers need. And we know from the short-range transit plan, I believe that you guys are all provided a copy of, we are serving transit-dependent customers here in Bloomington Normal. I know I have a quick amount of time, so I'm going to open up for questions.
We have to have some very few questions, but questions. Alderman Carrero.
Thanks, Isaac. I really appreciate you coming here, and I know you've talked with me a lot. We've exchanged a lot of emails, and I've learned a lot.
Yep.
And I appreciate that. Just a couple of follow-up questions. One of the things we talked about previously, you talk about public transit systems have taxing authority versus what we have here. What is the local funding like compared to our funding between the taxing body when they have taxing bodies or not?
Somewhere, 3 times they're getting 3 times as much local money that Connect Transit is getting here in Bloomington Normal. Other agencies such as Champaign, Springfield, Peoria, Rock Island.
And if you had additional local funding, would you have to increase rates?
We would not.
And those taxing bodies, do some of those have $1 as the rate?
Most of those agencies outside of Rockford have $1 right now. There's a little bit of variance between certain agencies such as Peoria. They charge for transfers, $1 per transfer. We do not. All of our transfers are free.
Right.
But most of those agencies all have $1. Springfield, I do believe, is at $1.25.
And also, the ultimate, I think, plan is to increase the fares here to $1.50, right?
Correct. It's a 4-year plan to 2024. However, the board always has the option to stop any of those fare increases from happening.
Right. Okay. Do you have any more details on the proposed solution?
Yeah, so I'll let you know that we are planning on making a route deviation from the pink route to serve West Orlando Avenue. It'd be a cost-neutral solution and provide service to those individuals who say they cannot get out to Main Street to that bus stop.
And any alternatives to the fare increase?
So the fare increase, something that working group is going to be taking a look at. The working group was approved by the board in April. So a group of our community members, riders of Connect Transit are also going to be on there. And they're going to discuss this, and they're going to look at where we're at today, Connect Transit, our funding situation. They're going to look at all of our documents, our short-range transportation plan, and say what kind of public transit system do we want, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how do we get there? And so I know funding is going to be one of the topics they discuss. And it's always a possibility the board comes back before their work is done, the working group's work is done, and say, let's hold off on the fare increase for another 3 months. That's always a possibility. But I think it's important for that working group to get started and having those conversations to see how they feel about it before we go forward with the October 1st fare increase.
And is just a couple more questions. Is one of the options before October to come to this council and to normal council and ask for additional fundings to prevent the fare increase?
Yeah, we can. Again, I don't want to not let the working group do what we've asked them to do in that task. If the working group says, hey, we should go to the Bloomington and Town Council and ask for additional funding for this, then that's exactly what we're going to do.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Painter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were going to give a discount for paratransit people. How much of a
Yeah.
discount?
So how the value card it works, if you spend 25, it's a 5% discount. If you spend 50, it's a 10% discount. And if you spend $85, it's a 15% discount. So anybody, and it doesn't expire. That's the best thing about this. The unlimited pass expires after 30 days. The value cards do not expire. And what we're seeing is 80% of our customers don't take more than 32.5 trips to make the unlimited Connect Mobility Pass work for them. So these customers are going to get a discount, and they can buy that value pass, and they can use it for 1 month, 2 months, however long it takes until the value is off the card.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Alderwoman Bolin and then Emig.
Yeah, there have been a lot of questions about raising fees, raising more tax dollars
Yep.
from the city, and I went through the budget kind of line by line, and I guess I have some questions. You're going to be ordering 40-foot long electric buses,
Yep.
and from what I see, the 40-foot long buses have sort of reduced accessibility into certain neighborhoods. And then, of course, the solar panels, and I wondered about return on investment on that. And apparently only 150,000 is going to be put into shelters, and I'm concerned about that because that's actually what the rioters need. And that the administration costs went up about 30%, I believe. And basically my philosophy is that the Connect Transit should be on the human scale, which means that you take care of the people that are riding from their home to place of work. And from there, once the system is to the point where it's large enough and sustainable, then you begin to expand with downtown transfer stations and that type of thing. That's just coming from my philosophy.
Okay. Let me go ahead and address these. Hopefully I remembered them all. So we're actually investing $880,000 in the Better Bus Stops campaign over the next 4 years through the budget.
How much?
$888,000.
Over how many years?
Next 4 years.
Next 4 years. That's $200,000 per year.
Yep. And then we're also looking for grants, federal discretionary grants to apply for as well. We're actually applying for one that's due next Friday or this Friday for additional funding as well. The electric buses, we're actually sending out an RFP soon. It's going to give options for 35 or 40-foot buses. When you look at electric buses and the cost to operate them, if done correctly, they're actually much cheaper than running and operating a diesel bus. What we plan on doing with the solar electric infrastructure is not only powering or storing and powering energy for us. That's not going to cost us more money from the utility companies, but we're also going to power our administration building with those solar arrays as well. And we're going to be able to store the solar array, the power from the solar arrays in battery packs on our property so that we can use that for our building and then also to charge the buses. But there's about $256,000 savings over 14 years by running and operating an electric bus versus a diesel. Did I miss? Oh, the administration cost. I'm not sure when the increase of 30% happens. Has that been over the last 5 years or?
I think it started FY19.
Okay.
It appears that you're going to be adding 2 or 3
So-
administrative positions over the next 4 years.
Yeah, we're actually, only position we've added this year was for Medicaid, for billing for Medicaid. So that's a new program that we just started. We applied for it, took 6 to 8 months to get everything in line so we can accept Medicaid payments. So that position basically handles all the Medicaid forms and paperwork between the state and ourselves, and also ensures that customers basically can take trips that are qualified for Medicaid for free. And we believe that person will pay for itself for the revenue we get for it. We're going to probably be around $100,000 next year in revenue from Medicaid.
And I would just like to make a comment. I read in the newspaper that you felt your integrity was maybe being questioned. I assure you, I'm not questioning your
I appreciate
integrity,
that. Thank
okay?
you.
Okay. I'm sorry, we're going to need to move on because we want to make sure that Isaac, I'm going to, let's see. Matthew was Jamie. Okay, Jamie and then Julie.
Thanks, Isaac. So I just had a couple thoughts. You just mentioned that the price difference between the 30 and the 40-foot buses was pretty even when you actually come down to it. My concern, and I've voiced this to you before, is that the 40-foot buses, the additional weight is actually has a higher cost to the city in they're heavy enough, they're tearing up the roads. And we've seen this at Front Street. I mean, you can literally see where the buses stop because the asphalt and everything shifts from the weight of those buses. So, is if that's the scenario, then I would still rather pay for the 30-foot buses to not have that damage to the road. I mean, I don't know that we've done a comprehensive study of every place the buses stop at every bus stop, but for the first 10 years I lived in my house, there was a bus stop right in front of my front porch, and I can tell you that the road there is torn up. And then now it's one block down the road. I haven't looked to see if it's tearing up there. So I've said this to you before. I would still prefer to see those smaller buses, and I think that while not all of the places in town when we did the route restructure in 2016 were because of the larger buses, there were a few that the larger buses cannot get into those places. So I just make that comment there. One of the things, though, that I was talking about with somebody earlier today was that you gave us a price that a Connect Mobility ride costs $32. Is that
That's
roughly
correct.
$32, right? But you've also told the council before in the past that a fixed route ride costs roughly $4 and change.
Yep.
I was looking through some of the information. The amount of Connect Mobility rides that have been requested is going up significantly. And two ways to think about that. One way is to think about that as that we're providing a service to more people. But the other way to do that is we're making fixed route rides inaccessible to people as well. So just as kind of a level setting for the working group, I would like to see us figure out how to accommodate more people on our regular fixed route rides because it's more efficient for them to have the ability to move around more frequently and more often. And then it's more efficient on the entire system to lower that cost down as a per ride cost, right? Because I think that we need to focus on the need and not so much the green aspect of the Connect Transit service. We need to make sure that the people who are dependent on the service get where they need to go first versus the people who are choosing to use the service. To me, those are two different groups of people. And then the only other thing I just want to say is there's been conversation about, Connect Transit is not a taxing district like it has before. I actually see that as a good thing, mostly because as soon as, or if Connect Transit were to ever attempt to become a taxing body, all kinds of crazy rules and lawyers and administration costs and everything are going to kick into play, and that's all money that gets quote-unquote wasted because it's not actually being applied to delivering services to people. So just some thoughts that I think that we should focus on. How do we service more people instead of putting them in the Connect Mobility situations? How do we get more people where they can comfortably get from their residence onto the fixed route buses quickly and easily? And that means that you've talked about in the past that Connect Transit's moving to a policy of not going into parking lots, not going into neighborhoods and stuff like that. And I think that that's a policy that we need to reverse to bring those vehicles back into those areas where people actually want to live and deliver service from there. So,
Thanks. Anything you want to add quickly because we need to go to get
Yeah,
you
I
out
just
here.
want to say that Connect Mobility ridership has been going up since well before 2008. It's continuing going up about the same percentage each and every year that it has well prior to the route restructure of 2016. And I know we probably don't agree about the route restructure of 2016 and our policies of having buses stay out of parking lots. It's not safe. And you're talking about liability costs and lawyer costs. That happens when you start going back into parking lots everywhere in the community. Only takes one major accident where somebody gets hurt and Connect Transit gets sued. So.
Alderwoman Emig.
And thank you again, Isaac, for meeting with me as well and answering many of my questions. So I'll make this to the point, in reference to the MCRCP report, it's predicted that we'll have a 16% increase in ridership by 2023. And if you could just speak like from how are you making that projection, and how does that ratio play out in terms of ridership versus coverage? And I'm almost asking this for a friend of mine who is transit dependent, and enjoys the bus a lot. But one question she had about the funds for the transfer center, and whether or not those funds could be used for other capital projects, such as improved sidewalks, and why not? She said, isn't it kind of like paying thousands of dollars for a really nice dress and then not taking a shower?
Yeah.
And I said, I think there might be another metaphor there. But that relationship is really tricky, and folks are having trouble getting their heads around it.
Yeah. So I just want to briefly talk about the route restructure since you brought it up. And the short-range transit plan basically states we are serving transit-dependent customers with good high-frequency service that they need because they're transit-dependent. They don't have automobiles. They're low-income individuals. So we've seen a spike in ridership. This year, we're about 10%. We're going to be back to our ridership numbers of 2016 prior to the route restructure. And we're far outperforming all of our regional, national peer agencies in terms of ridership. And it goes back to we put our routes where they need to be in this community to serve transit-dependent customers. So that's in regards to the ridership. In terms of the capital budget and how do we fund the downtown transfer center, we're using a combination of discretionary grants, federal grants, and a little bit of local money and state funding to be able to build the downtown transfer center. As Councilmember Matthew has talked about, Front Street, we've been there for 20 years, I do believe. Before that, we were at the courthouse, the McLean County History Museum courthouse before that. So we don't have the proper amenities right now to be able to serve 1,800 boardings a day in downtown Bloomington at Front Street.
Right. Thank you very much. We're going to, Jen, we're technically out of time, but go ahead. We need to be quick. Get him out.
Mr. Thorne, I just wanted to ask you, so how much money do you anticipate will be generated through the raising of the fares?
Yeah, so $130,000, and I get this question: why do it? $130,000.
Right.
Why do it?
What would you mind telling me what percentage that is of the Connect Transit's overall budget?
1% maybe.
Okay.
So the reason why that $130,000 is actually two reasons. We lose less of our federal allocation, which in 2024 we're going to run out of federal funding for transit operations. The second reason is we can then leverage that $130,000 for an additional $241,000 of IDOT funding.
Okay. And can I ask you, what were the format of these 14 engagement listening sessions that were held before?
We held them throughout the community. So we held, I think, 2 at our facility. We held 2 on a community bus near the West Orlando Avenue. We held them at the Bloomington Library, the Normal Library, so various locations throughout the community.
And how many people would you say participated?
So we maybe had 30 to 40 individuals participate in that. What we try to do is talk to people one-on-one about, hey, let's explain what we're doing, get your feedback, answer any of your questions or concerns that you have.
What percentage would that be of the overall ridership that you serve?
I have no idea. Very, very small percentage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Isaac. We appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't get to go?
Oh, well, you're going to have to be very fast because we were out of time with Jen.
Sorry. I know you got somewhere to be. So
And again, this is not like a normal thing. We need to get him out of here.
Yes, I apologize. Thank you for sticking around. Just really quickly, I just wanted to touch on something Donna had said, that I see a couple board members here. I see Mike and I see Judy. I talked to Ryan the other day. I appreciate the work of the board. I appreciate the work of the staff in trying to sort these issues out. I'm always very excited when people want to talk about transit. I think we can work some more on some of these larger term issues. But what I really want to focus on is something you said at the very beginning. I haven't decided you're not going to be here for this conversation about rejecting the budget. You described it as devastating.
Yep.
Can you walk me through what it looks like for if the budget's rejected July 1st, maybe 3 months later, and then you said December, it sounded like services would have to cease.
Yep.
Kind of walk me through from the average rider's perspective what would happen.
So if we resume service on July 1st and we don't have a budget, like I said, our IDOT application stops because legally we don't have a budget. We have to start that IDOT application, Downstate Operating Assistance Program application, all over again.
Okay.
Typically, IDOT takes 6 months to approve that. They have to sign off on it. We have to sign off on it, and then they finally give us funding. So what I'm explaining is if we have to run service starting July 1st, we're only going to make it through sometime in December before. We have to suspend service, and no customer is going to get Connect Transit service at all. And employees will be laid off, essentially.
Okay.
Yep.
But do we haven't really had, and I'm looking to George, we haven't had any real definitive legal word, as far as I know, on what would happen. In other words, if one of the bodies in an intergovernmental agreement rejects this, whether they can, I mean, they don't really have a budget. Can they not? Then they can't use the Bloomington portion. They can only use the normal portion, or can they not operate at all? Do we know that?
The only thing the ordinance says, that Connect and Transit ordinance says, that if rejected by one or both of the two cities, the cities will work with the board. So the ordinance provides that if it's rejected by one or both of the cities will work to create a new budget with the system. And that's all it says. So it's kind of open-ended as to what would happen if it's rejected.
But if they would work together, there's 4 business days between the time we would vote to reject it and the end of their fiscal year. We don't have any, are there no precedents then as to what would happen, Mr. Boyle?
We're aware of. Have been looking and haven't seen anything on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. I know you got to go.
And you got to go.
So much.
Thank you very much
for allowing me to talk tonight. Thank you.
All right. Next, we will move to public comment, and I do understand that there may be a motion to extend public comment.
Yes, Mayor, I'd move to extend public comment from 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
Okay. There's because we do have actually 16 people who want to address the council. You have up to 3 minutes. We do not respond, but this is our normal ordinance says 30 minutes, and you're asking for suspension of the rules to go to 45 minutes. And before I go any further, is there a second to that motion?
Is 45 minutes enough for everybody to speak?
That should be enough unless everybody goes to the 3 minute. We could do 48 minutes to be sure that everybody has.
That would be great.
Is the seconder?
I agree to that.
Okay. We could do up to 48 minutes. That means everybody has up to their 3 minutes if they want it. Okay.
I second.
Seconded, as amended by Alderwoman Carrillo. Just to, again, to clarify, this requires a 2/3 vote because it is a suspension of the rules. If everyone will go ahead and vote on the motion as presented. Okay, the motion carries 7-2. There are 2 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Bolin and Councilmember Bray.
Thank you very much. Motion carries, and so we will start. I'll also read them in groups of 3 to be, sure that everyone has as much, time to come forward and some of the logistics on that. So we will start it. I'll add another minute here. 6:29, and we have Heidi Zimmerman, Thalia Klunik, and Eric Morenz in that order. So Heidi, if you'd come first, and I believe it's Thalia, and then Eric, and I'll go through them in groups of 3. Thanks, Heidi.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Zimmerman. I've come here to encourage each of you to uphold basic checks and balances in our local government. The proposed increases to the paratransit fares will not improve the budget by even 1%, as we've already heard. We ask that you hold Connect Transit accountable for their decision to put such an enormous burden on people who cannot ride the fixed routes. If this budget is approved, as is, even with the Orlando Avenue compromise that we just heard, you have to acknowledge that people in our community will still be cut off from paratransit services because the whole northeast corridor, where all the runs, will still be cutting people off from paratransit or be pushing them into a more expensive premium zone.
You must also acknowledge the fact that people with disabilities will be forced to choose between paying rent or getting rides to work and medical appointments, because what he left out is that that value card for $85, if you can come up with $85 at once, only buys you 20 trips out of your home. It also means you're forcing fixed route reliant riders to wait months or years for their bus stops to finally become ADA compliant. If some of you believe that you can still approve this budget and then try to retroactively fix the problems, I would like to remind you that the harm will be far greater for riders than to the transit system if there's a short delay. And I do mean a short delay. I don't think we need 6 months to fix this. So the question I lay before you is simple. Is it more important to you to protect the vulnerable citizens or an agency that has an $8.5 million surplus? If some of you think that it's simply too late to revisit the transit budget, I ask that you consider the numerous times that myself and others have addressed the Connect Transit Board and the councils beginning in March of this year to bring the concerns to the table. The riders are not the ones who have run down the clock until the final seconds, and you should not punish them for the delayed actions of others. I am very certain that the Connect Transit Agency will be highly motivated to negotiate a new budget as quickly as possible so that they can complete the application for downstate operating assistance. I'm also optimistic that Connect Transit would be willing to revisit the budget, especially given the news that the Illinois state spending bill that was approved just earlier this month includes billions of additional dollars for long-term sustainable funding for public transportation. I'm ecstatic to hear that many of you are embracing the forgotten responsibilities you bear as part of the intergovernmental agreement for transit, and I really look forward to a future where both Bloomington and Normal will engage in meaningful and ongoing oversight of the Connect Transit system. But we cannot forsake the critical problems at hand by relishing in our aspirations of what we hope tomorrow will look like, because people's lives are on the line now. Please help advocate for the needs of your constituents by allowing a vote next week to renegotiate this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. So Leah Klunik, and then Eric, and then Deborah Hawkins.
Good evening. My name is Thalia Klunik.
Sorry.
That's okay. I am the president of Amalgamated Transit Union 752. We are the bus drivers, the dispatchers, all the people who run transit, really. When these routes were first changed back in 2016, the union, several of us, went to the board, the administration. You need to have these routes go into transfer centers. They refused to do the olive. They changed the purple, also made a silver route. Purple goes downtown now. It's an excellent route. Lots of ridership since then. They refused to listen to us on the olive. The olive does not go to a transfer center. The only place it goes, it sits on each end. It has time to go to a transfer center. They will not change it. We have people that go from wheelchairs in the middle of winter from Walmart in Normal to Sam's and Menards. Try that sometime in the middle of winter with snow on the ground. The olive could be changed to go to Sam's and Menards and to Uptown. It has the time. It sets on each end. It sets on Orlando. It sets at the OSF Center for Health. They refused to do it, and I don't know if it's because they knew it would fail, but the two routes they're proposing to put on, the Red Express and the Lime Express, those routes already have 3 buses on them. They do not need another bus just going to Menards or to Walmart and back. They don't. Several scenarios have been proposed by different members of our union, different ways the olive could go to accommodate, and because they told me that, it would just be repetitive. If the olive went down School Street, it would just be repetitive. Well, that's what the Red and Lime Express are. It's just repetitive. It's not going to help ridership any. And in fact, it might confuse some people because they might get on that Red Express thinking they're going downtown, and they're not. They're going to go to OSF and back uptown. I don't know why they didn't want to change the Olive. It it's just out there with no transfer center. Also, the fare increases. I drive the mobility bus. All day long, I have people with 30-day passes that ride all to and from every day. And so when he says 80% of the people don't use it, that's just not true.
Thank you. Eric Morenz, Rebecca Hawkins, and Carol Ruger. Eric Morenz.
I'm Eric.
I am Eric. I get the word increase. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. And then Deborah Hawkins, Carol, I think it's Ruger, and then Bradley Morris.
Hi, I'm Deborah Hawkins, and I'm not here to talk about the bus, and I've never been here before, so is this okay? I'm here to talk about the liquor license that was applied for over on Elm Street in Bloomington, the old liquor store. I guess they're trying to call it the Park Pantry. I'm here because I'm very, very against that. I am a resident in that neighborhood. I live 2 doors west of that place, and I also am the business owner to the adjacent property. Um, Before that, my parents had owned that property, both properties, for 30 years. For 30 years, we have had lots of issues because of the alcoholism, the drunks, the drugs, the fighting, and within the last few weeks that this has been closed, or a few months, there has been none of that. We have not had people urinating in our yards. We have not have people out in the streets, out in the streets arguing and fighting. Where we live right now, we have sat on our front porch and watched drug deals on the corner numerous times. It's very unsafe over there at night because of the way the trees and everything are. I have 16 grandchildren, and until the liquor store was closed, they were never allowed to even play in their front yard. When it comes to our business, we've had numerous problems with intoxicated people all hours, day and night. We've had issues with them coming to our business and being rude to maybe some of our customers that are there at the time on our premises. We've had to have people taken away from our premises, and it's all based on what's going on at that liquor store. Since the liquor store is closed, the foot traffic has went down 90%, and which is a great deal. We live in a neighborhood. I know I have a business there, but it's an automotive shop. We are not open at night. We are not selling alcohol. It's one thing if they were to open a grocery store or something, because we know, yes, we could use a grocery store or something on that side of town. But a liquor store, there are numerous other places within walking distance from there that sell liquor. So I'm 62 years old, and I don't feel that we need another liquor store in our area. I mean, I don't think anyone sitting here really like 2 doors down from them and see some of the things that we've seen. And I mean, it's just a very negative thing for our neighborhood. And it's a very negative thing for our business. My father had been in business for 60 years.
I'm sorry, you have to, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please consider what I said. I know I'm not, like you guys, but...
Yeah. Thank you very much. Carol, and then Bradley, and Rebecca.
I am here to speak about the bus issue. Thalia does not know why they want so badly to discontinue the yellow bus. I have some pretty good suspicions because once upon a time that route was their busiest route for many years. They were trying to cancel it then. Then, for a few years after some changes, it was their second busiest route. They were still trying to cancel it. There has been a clear and consistent pattern over a number of years now. Virtually, not all, but virtually all, most of the changes that have been made have been to make the regular bus routes less and less and less accessible to the elderly, to the disabled, and to the poor. It's been a consistent pattern. They have moved the routes farther away from the places where these people live. They've moved them farther away from the places where these people need to go. There's no longer a route that goes by the Social Security office. You know, these are places that the elderly and the disabled need to go. It's been consistent. And consistently, the bus stops have been moved to more and more and more inaccessible places. This isn't a random accident that's happened here and there. It has been consistent every single time. And these meetings, they had their hearing sessions, and the people who work for the bus company, the people who work in the offices, are wonderful. They're wonderful. They listen, and they're concerned. The bus drivers and their union, they're great. They're concerned. They want to help. But they're not being listened to any more than we are when we go to those board meetings. People go there in tears, begging for bus service. Every single time there are people there in tears, begging for public transportation, begging those people to do their jobs. And they get the same blank screen every time, and nothing that they say registers. It's all just utterly ignored. I don't believe that Connect Transit wants to be a public transportation company. They want the title. They want the funds. But they do not want to deal with the public. We are messy, us disabled people. We're messy. We slow things down a little bit. That's true. We do. But we are part of the public, and we need that service.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Bradley and Rebecca and Karen Bays. There's the mic. Yeah.
Hi. I'm Bradley Morris, the same one that's emailed all of you, and some of you have responded. I'm sorry, I can't.
It's okay.
No, I can't.
It's okay. I know. Can I just talk a little bit?
Yeah.
So Bradley has, can I speak for a moment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Bradley resides at Orlando, and
Orlando, okay.
Orlando Northbrook,
Okay.
the bus route that they're
Yeah.
cutting off. Some of you partook in, or I know you did, Jeff. You came out and visited with Bradley. Bradley's got a wound on his hand just from just one trip up and down the road that the city has shut down even the sidewalks along the way, that they couldn't even get out there to get to the bus stop where they're going to potentially have to go to. So.
And that's in
That's in Normal.
in Normal off Orlando. Okay.
But Bloomington, here's the thing is, he wants to be heard, and any of you can come and visit with Bradley at Orlando. He welcomes you. And the ones that didn't reply, take a moment.
Do your job. Do your job.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Cook, Karen Bays, and then Peg Malone, I believe.
So I'm Rebecca Cook, and I don't need a microphone. I've been, I think, 6 meetings now. I've driven 65 miles from the other side of Peoria. Yeah, why? Because it may be me using the bus someday. My mom resides down here, works at Orlando, runs it for the last 12, 14 years or whatever. And thank you, Jeff, for, that was the day before Father's Day. You got to ride in my dad's wheelchair, and I appreciate that. My dad has pushed me along to be where I am today. Standing here speaking for other people. I've ridden the bus with a gentleman that's in a wheelchair that doesn't have the option, and I'm not talking about Bradley, but I'm talking about another resident that lives there that doesn't have a bus. He doesn't have the means to go, or doesn't have a car, doesn't have the means to jump in and off, on and off a vehicle. You have to help lift him in and out of the vehicle. And to step through that mud at the Walmart parking lot over on Veterans Parkway that you guys have allowed Connect Transit to have that bus service there, drop off in the mud. And yeah, it's fixed. I talked to one of the managers today. He went to one of the meetings. He's been to several of the meetings to get that thing fixed over there. But that's what's still going on at the normal College Avenue Round Rock that you get off at that bus stop. How would you like walking with a walker or a wheelchair going through 2-inch Round Rock as a stroke victim? Every one of you. Tim, Kim, Jeff, you're great. Scott, Jennifer, try it. Get in the bus. Why, I mean, I don't know how many times you guys have been there. And Terry, thank you. You look wonderful today. Joni, Julie, and everybody else, just be in the wheelchair for a moment. Be a speaker. Connect Transit. I've had a meeting. Bradley and I went and chatted with Isaac. At the very beginning, he put out the public knowledge saying that they're discontinuing the Olive Route. That all those meetings that they held on some of the buses, they had 2 meetings there. They gave the wrong address. They actually had it at the ISU location, but their address was actually at the driver's license facility. Not facility, but a driver's license training school. They're on Route US 150. So they gave you the wrong address. We're sitting there. They finally show up with the bus. 5 minutes after when the meeting was supposed to start, they had to take down their table that they had the Tootsie Rolls on for us to get everybody in there. That bus was packed. It was filled. There was no other spot for people to sit. And Mr. Isaac Thorne sat there and said that only 30 or 40 people showed up. I was there. I drove 65 miles to come to that meeting. How many of you drive out of your way? And I would have been to a meeting on Saturday, but I had already driven to Bloomington 3 times for the week. I can't. Here again we are. But Isaac Thorne sat there in the meeting and didn't want to listen to go and make it an option. I even said, what about doing the route Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? Didn't want to hear it. Maybe you guys can go and have somebody that's a writer on the Connect board that actually is disabled or actually does use it because they have to use it. It's sickening. It's sickening that it's occurring.
Thank you.
Guys, safe travels home.
Thanks. Karen Bays, Peg, I think it's Peg Malone. I'm not sure about that. Malane, and then Carrie Handy.
Hello. Again, mine's not for the public transit either. It's in concern for the liquor thing that's being passed. Just very concerned about, they talk about revitalization, and I don't think adding more alcohol to the situation is revitalizing. To me, revitalization means life. It's breathing something new into something that is not good. And I think adding that on top of that would not be good. I haven't missed the foot traffic at all. And I've enjoyed having, like she said, her grandchildren being able to play outside in the front. I have a fenced-in yard, but still we're able to go up and down the sidewalk and not be harangued by the people. And I just, they talked about applying for the alcohol, then it turned into, it wasn't alcohol so much as they wanted a convenience, and it just became leading away from what it was originally to get, I think, what they wanted out of it. And if the building's an eyesore, the parking lot's an eyesore, I mean, it's just an eyesore in general, tear it down, put in a park, put in a community garden. That's revitalization. That's something that the community can come together on. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, Peg, and I may have mispronounced your name.
It would be Malcolm.
Malcolm. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
I
Peg and then Carrie
signed in because other people
and
signed
Gary Lambert. Okay.
all of sued.
If you come on up and speak into the microphone, please. Thank you.
So, here's my story. I've been friends with Deb and her family 30 years. Known Karen 30 years. I came to the city meeting just to check it out because I love this kind of stuff. The foot traffic when the liquor store was there was insane. I worried about my car sitting on the street. They walk by and got to see what's there. Somebody going to key it? You never know. Foot traffic is gone. It's just nicer without it. You know, I'm not prepared to speak. I'm just kind of rattling here. But don't put another liquor store in a neighborhood where there's children playing. Children. Like all you guys have in your neighborhood, children. This is a neighborhood. Neighborhood, not the east side, not all these other places that have liquor stores. It doesn't need to happen. And the deal with the Connect Transit, I'm with all you guys that struggle. I do senior care services, so I see it every day. All the stuff at Walmart, you know, they're worried about getting sued, but these people, you know, they got to go clear through the parking lot where they could get hit to get to a sidewalk that's muddy, and Bradley's got a sword in his hand because he's got to go clear down the street. That's not fair. It's mean. Give them what they need, honestly. It's easy for us. We all drive. They don't. We need to be nice to them, you know, because they don't have a lot of nice things that really happen for them. They don't have the money. An increase? 1%? What's 1%? Even in my poor life, what's 1%? And I don't know how much money they make, but come on, cut them some slack. And no more liquor store in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Next, Carrie Handy, and then Gary Lambert and R.J. McCracken, I believe.
Good evening. I'm a little ill-prepared. I've never been to one of these meetings, didn't anticipate on speaking. I'm also here regarding the former Westside Liquor. I've been in the neighborhood. I live right on Elm Street near Morris Avenue. I've been there for about approximately 4 years. It's my understanding the new owners want to open a convenience/liquor store. It's my understanding they originally requested that they be allowed to be open until 1 a.m. on weekdays and 2 a.m. on weekends. I believe a compromise was suggested or recommended that they be allowed to stay open until 11 p.m. in a trial type phase. I don't feel it's appropriate to have a convenience/liquor store at that location at all. In the 4 years I've lived there, and I'm also from Bloomington, Westside Liquor, it was always shenanigans in the parking lot, loud music, you know, radio systems booming, lots of foot traffic, not positive foot traffic. And the key word being neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood. We have Miller Park, which I believe closes at 10 o'clock. We've got the new Parkview Inn that's recently been rebuilt. And today at work, I came up with 10 different locations within a mile and a half radius of where Westside Liquors currently is. And we could get alcohol and convenience items at 10 different places within where we live. I don't see why we need a convenience store plopped in the middle of our neighborhood. In other areas of the city, there are not
convenience stores / liquor stores plopped in the middle of a neighborhood. These, and matter of fact, all these things that I've cited here are on major streets. They're on Market Street. They're on Main Street. They're on, 6 Points Road near Veterans Parkway, because that's what convenience stores are. They're on major thoroughfares so people on their way home can stop and get what they need. To put a liquor store and to suggest that it be open until even 11 o'clock at night is completely unacceptable. I work 2 jobs. When the very park shuts down at 10, why would I want all this traffic so people could stop and get their liquor or their, $3 bread, at those hours of the night, and I just don't think it's appropriate. And in the spirit of, revitalization, I don't consider a convenience store with overpriced items and a liquor store in a residential neighborhood appropriate at all. And I'm very against it, and I don't see anything good coming from it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's the next, Gary Lambert, RJ, and Rebecca Brennan.
After hearing all these very real problems, I'm almost embarrassed to come up here and speak, but I will. On the morning of a couple weeks ago, May 30th, I was eating breakfast, watching WEEK News, and I heard the word Bloomington mentioned. I looked up, and an elected official, during discussion about diversity, made a comment about Clarence Thomas. He said, "He sure does not behave like someone who is African American from my perspective." I thought about that for a bit. So I went out and looked up some quotes from Clarence. So I've got just a few short ones here. "To define each of us by our race is nothing short of a denial of our humanity." Another one. "It really bugs me that somebody will tell me, after I spent 20 years being educated, how I'm supposed to think." Another one. "I'd grown up fearing the lynch mobs of the Ku Klux Klan. As an adult, I was starting to wonder if I'd been afraid of the wrong white people all along, where I was being pursued not by bigots in white robes, but by left-wing zealots draped in flowing sanctimony." Another. "Long gone is the time when we opposed the notion that we all looked alike and talked alike. Somehow we have come to exalt the new black stereotype above all and to demand conformity to that norm. I assert my right to think for myself, to refuse to have my ideas assigned to me as though I were an intellectual slave because I'm black." Last. "Perhaps some are confused because they have stereotypes of how blacks should be, and I respectfully decline, as I did in my youth, to sacrifice who I am for who they think I should be." Thank you for your time.
Okay. R.J. McCracken and Rebecca Brennan and Jennifer Morse, I believe.
I'd like to thank the council for its time, and I'd like to do something that doesn't usually happen, and commend the city council for its actions recently in repaving the streets of downtown Bloomington and opening up the new Route 66 signs to encourage further tourism to our area and bring people into our beautiful community. The praise is over, though, and my concerns and what brings me here today lies with the roads that bring people from the highways into our city.
whether it be West Market Street, whether it be Main Street, either from Normal or from Bloomington, we are in an abysmal situation. We have potholes everywhere. Everyone who comes to our city is met with a perimeter of potholes. And what image does that send to people who try to come to our downtown businesses as we try to revitalize our downtown area? To piggyback on that, I believe that a reevaluation, as I know we have looked into the past, to the refacing of the downtown Bloomington area is in order. Boarded up windows, crumbling facades, and faded paint jobs are not things that bring people to our community and make people want to come back to our community, let alone make them want to stay here. I love this community, to be clear. I believe we have a beautiful town. We have a beautiful downtown area with a nostalgic American feel to it. But as we let it fade and become a relic of the past, we could be moving forward and we could be bringing people back to our community and make them want to stay, make them tell their friends that this is a stop on the Route 66 tour that's worth making. And I hope that we can move forward and kind of reevaluate that once more. To talk about the Connect Transit and just kind of weigh in on that, I didn't come prepared to talk about it. I love the points that the people here have made and can totally understand all the perspectives. The one thing that I will caution, however, is that I do believe that the threat of a shutdown by the Connect Transit Board is just a scare tactic to back you into a corner and force you to support a plan that they could otherwise come up with a new contingency for. To say that if we reject the plan this week, that shutdowns are imminent in December is just a threat. Please do not bow to those threats. Make them become accountable for their actions and hold them accountable for making sure that everyone gets their proper service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebecca Brennan, Jennifer Morrish, and Rob Ballantini.
Well, thanks for your time. I'm Rebecca Brennan, and I am the Vice President of Residential at Mark First, which is a non-for-profit that serves adults with developmental disabilities. We have several group homes throughout Bloomington and Normal. So what I want to come talk about today is the recent increase that has been proposed by Isaac, and we also had the privilege of meeting Martin. Excuse me, I'm not very good at talking in front of a bunch of people. Okay. And they came to Mark First to explain to us about their proposals. They showed us two proposals, the first being there still was going to be an unlimited pass. The second time they came, they were eliminating that unlimited pass and changing out these new value cards. To call them a value card kind of is comical after I went back and did the math for our agency. For one instance, we have people we support in an adult day program, and they go roughly to their adult day program about 20 times a month. And with the unlimited pass, it was $65 to just go to their day program. So no doctors, no fun recreational programs, nothing else. And that was $65. So now just to go to their adult day program with their new value cards, it's going to cost the people we support $144 a month. So to say that it's not a huge change, it's big for our guys who get $50 a month to spend on the things that they like. Of course, as an agency, we do help provide that cost, and that's going to hurt us pretty bad with that big change. And so that's kind of what I have to say today is please reconsider and have them change that budget because we can't have people do what they want to do with the big change that's about to come our way. So thanks.
Thank you. Jennifer, Rob Ballantini, and then Janice Welmerling.
Okay, forward. Okay, forward. Good job. Forward. And hold. Keep going forward more? Okay. Forward. And we're going to keep going. Yeah, I know. We see people we know. Let's go forward. Good job. Up, up. Let's go forward.
Right there.
Halt.
2 feet left.
To my left? Okay. Ah, I feel it. Okay. Hello. Okay.
You have the mic?
I'm looking for it. Hold on. Like the microphone? Yes, please. Why this problem? Oh my gosh. Okay. Come here, Laura. Sit. Oh, thank you. Hello. Can people hear me? Yes, no, maybe? Hey, Jen. Jen, we're over here. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Okay, hashtag blindness problem again. Sit. Okay, so, hold on. Sit, please, sir. Have a seat. Sit. Good. Sit.
job. Good. Yes, that was so smart. Nope, you gotta sit. I know you're excited because you gotta click. Sit. All right. So we are here today well, I'm here today. He's with me, just for cute factor, and to help me. But we're here today, and I've spoken to all of you before. But we're here today basically to say that people, being able-bodied is a temporary condition. Anybody could end up disabled, at some point in their life. And this isn't just disabled people that these bus changes affect. Obviously, it affects, seniors. It affects, people that are parents of small children. It affects all kinds of people. If it doesn't affect you personally, it affects people you know. And the fact of the matter is, if people don't have stops that are accessible to them, if people can't afford to get on the bus, people shouldn't be, the reason we're asking you to revisit the budget is people should not be priced out of their lives, out of living their lives and doing what they need to do. I mean, others have touched on it in regards to the value cards. They are not a value. They were presented as a quote-unquote value, but they are not. Hey, leave it. Sorry, that wasn't to you guys. That was to him, Mr. Sniffy Pants here. Anyway, they're not a value. So they're saying you get X amount of rides for this price. A ride is one way. The fare amounts are not changing. If anything, it sounds like they're going to be slightly increasing. But that's not a value. So so I have a neighbor, for example, who goes to and from work 5 times a week, okay? So if she just used, say, this $85 quote-unquote value card, that would give you, it's supposed to give you 40 rides, which is 20 round trips just within the regular zones. So it's $2 each way. She'd be able to go to and from work 20 times, and then she'd have to get something else. And that's just going to and from work. That's not doing anything else. That's not going to do errands. That's not, and in my case, same thing. And it's not going it would cover maybe a couple weeks worth of stuff. People would have to end up making decisions between if I had to get 2 of those value cards, that is literally half my rent. Literally half my rent. And so that's part of it, obviously, that we talked about. But also rider representation is hugely important on the board because people who rely on the bus should have the right to have a decision.
Jen, you have about 20 seconds or so. I'm sorry.
Okay. Have a right to have a say in the decision-making process of what happens to their transit. So that is, that's why we're asking you to revisit the budget. Yes, and I agree with the person who said that the whole idea of it's going to shut down is is a scare tactic because revisiting the budget does not mean it going away. It means looking at it again to make changes that are helpful for everybody.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks.
Okay, for it.
Next we have Rob Ballantini and then Janice.
Is it on? Well, I'm not going to bore you. I've been up here many times. My only question is, with this budget, are they actually doing the right thing? Ask your question, that's a question I ask. Are they actually doing the right thing? Simple answer, no. And I think you've heard it from probably 14 people on this issue tonight, and every one of them can say, no budget. And it's just very. I rode the Olive Route 4 or 5 hours on Friday. I came across a gentleman who uses a manual wheelchair, who has asthma, and also is an amputee. Yes, they just said that they're going to restructure it and everything. Again, I ask, Is it enough? Is it the right thing? You know, it's just a lot of thinking going on. I don't think they've been thinking about the whole situation. I think they just want to throw their hands up in the air and say, okay, we're done. But in closing, they're not doing the right thing. Let's think about this. Deny their budget and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Janice Welmerling.
Hi, everyone. This is Janice. I'm going to read a quick letter that she helped write today, and then she's going to speak. We are Changes to Independence Altogether, a self-advocacy group from Mark First. Mark First serves hundreds of children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in McLean County. We are writing in regards to the Connect Transit budget of 2020. To say the proposed cost of the Connect mobility would be devastating is an understatement. We use the Connect Transit monthly passes to have access to our developmental training program, which she goes to almost every single day, our jobs, our homes, and our community at large. Having $88 20 ride passes would not only be limiting us in getting out, but also hurting us financially. Each month we are only given $50 by the state, which is to be used for our clothing, all toiletries, any community activity bills, and food. By rejecting the budget for Connect Mobility for 2020 and looking for better options, we could help people stay independent, employed, and overall happier in the community. Okay, are you ready to say something, Jan?
Yes, make something. I hope I pray to them they don't do it. No, I, I pray that the bus comes in here, keep the bus route that they have.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to a consideration and action to approve the Committee of the Whole minutes from the May 20th, 2019 meeting as requested by the City Clerk's Office. Any comments or corrections or a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Bray. Any further discussion? Or any discussion? Yes. Yeah, seeing none, if you'll go ahead and vote, an aye would be to approve the minutes as presented. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And we then move right along to the number 6 on our agenda, presentation of the potential impacts of the recent adopted State of Illinois fiscal year 2020 budget and that it may have on the City of Bloomington as requested by the Finance and Administration Departments. And we're going to start with a brief overview by our City Manager and ultimately Scott Rathman. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. With the recent passage of the state 2020 budget, felt that it'd be prudent to share with Council and especially the community what we do know at this point, which is not a lot. The dust is still settling on the state 20 budget. Also, the Illinois Municipal League has weighed in, so a lot of the information that's going to be presented tonight is the efforts that's been led by the Illinois Municipal League. Scott Rathman is the finance director. I've asked him to prepare this for us. One thing that I'll additionally say is the city proposed 4 different capital projects, and those are still very much in play. While it looks as if the state representatives, state senators might have a certain amount of money to individually invest in their areas, there's also a fair amount of money at the governor's level. So the capital projects that were submitted, those still, again, are very much in play. So this is just a preliminary look. We'll follow this up as we learn more. Scott?
Thank you, sir. As Tim stated, this is very preliminary. A deep dive has not occurred. We've had several conversations in the Finance Department with contacts at the Department of Revenue and elsewhere, and there's actually some disagreement in their interpretation of some of the legislation still. So it's, we've gotten, especially, I'll be going over the slide in a few moments about the motor fuel tax, an indication with the doubling at the state level. That could mean a 100% increase for our funding, to 0% to 50%, somewhere in between. So tonight's presentation is going to show the 50% that came from the IML on that one. So take this with a grain of salt, but these are some of the more higher impact, more highly publicized items that have occurred. They're going to affect us directly. So first of all, we'll start with what has continued from prior years. In 2018, the state enacted a service fee and a holdback on the local government distributive fund. So the service fee started at 2.2% on our home rule sales tax. So we have $23.6 million budgeted for home rule. You will not find that amount in the budget because that's grossed up. We just put in the net amount after the fees. So the 1.5% is having a $354,000 reduction on our budget for the coming year. Income tax distribution, a $7.8 million income, 5% holdback. That was 10% the first year, so we're grateful that they brought that back, but it's still very significant. You can see $390,000 in reduction in the distribution for income tax from the state. So total state reduction is $744,000. So in my opinion, that's a material impact the state has had on our finances. Switching to a more positive impact. I mentioned this. State motor fuel tax, I'm just talking about the gasoline tax here, 19 cents, so it doubled. The city of Bloomington average motor fuel tax has been very consistent, comes in $1.8 million per year. Just to kind of step back, recall state motor fuel tax different than our local motor fuel tax. It's just, the 4% or 4-cent increase that we did just for streets and alleys and sidewalks here in town. The $1.8 million for motor fuel tax has to be this is state-approved projects. So IML has stated that after the full distribution formula has been analyzed by them, that we should be looking at a 50% increase. So that means $900,000 increase. Now, the state's fiscal year is a couple months different than ours. So we should, in the future, be looking at $2.7 million annually, but this year it'll be somewhat less than that. We'll start seeing that come in September or October of this year, so we'll be able to kind of crunch those numbers and see what this coming year is going to really realize. But going forward, it should be around $2.7 million. Internet sales tax legislation. Last October, the Supreme Court ruling went into effect where internet retailers selling products in the state of Illinois, if they have, I'll check my notes here, I believe it's $100,000 or 200 transactions that are occurring in the state of Illinois, they are required to collect sales tax. They've expanded this legislation to kind of put the burden on facilitators like Amazon to collect that tax. There are some very large numbers that are being thrown around related to that impact. When we spoke to the Department of Revenue, they were kind of questioning those. They think a lot of these facilitators have already made that step. I mean, for the coming year, we've increased our use tax, $450,000 over the prior year. So a lot of that may already be captured. But starting in July of 2020, the locally imposed sales tax, or home rule sales tax, will need to be included. That could have a very material impact for us. We try to do some very rough calculations, based on the $450,000 increase we're projecting for next year, versus, dividing it into 6.25% that's just the use tax related. We're looking at a potential for $200,000 increase in home rule. I think that might be a little light, given some of the projections we're seeing now. But just to give you an idea what that one change could have as far as an impact on our finances goes. Other items. I know I'm rolling through this pretty fast, but as I mentioned, very high level. I've not been able to do a deep dive. A lot of this is still being reviewed. Legalized cannabis. Potential for revenues from sales tax, including up to a 3% local tax. Obviously, that would be pending council action. Video gaming, that was expanded. They increased the number of terminals. They've increased the bets allowable. So once again, that would be up to council action as well. Aviation fuel tax. This is something that we have a question in IML. There's an aviation fuel tax trust fund that's being set up, and we're concerned that potentially some of our sales tax may be diverted to this fund. But there could be an exemption because we do provide services for the airport in terms of the fire prevention out there. So we may have an exemption. We have a request in IML to review that for us. Jeff Jurgens noted he's been doing some deep diving from the statute standpoint that there's a parking tax that we may have to deal with. The state has imposed a 6% state tax on parking revenues. Whether or not that's going to be expanded to municipalities remains to be determined, but potentially that could mean that we may have to add 6% onto our parking garages and monthly fees. Any questions? That was very, very quick review, very high level.
You may not know the answer to this. What do they mean by betting limits increase?
Well, I don't do the video gaming terminals, but from what I understand, maximum bets went from $2 to $4.
That is true, and then increased terminal amounts from 5 to 6.
5 to 6, the number of terminals per
yeah,
owner.
That part I knew. Thank you. I was just, thank you. Thanks. Oh, Alderman Black.
Thank you, and thank you, Scott and Tim, for coming forward on this and being proactive. I know that when I saw that it had passed, I was not only shocked that the state of Illinois did something, I was not shocked that it included so many things that they don't quite have a full grasp on. And I guess from where I sit, when I see some of these things that we have so many questions on, we used to do a bring the legislators, meet the legislators event. We didn't do it because I think for a while it wasn't the most productive use of anybody's time. Frankly, I don't know what the council's appetite would be, but if we did those again around some of these very specific issues, I think that'd be of really good value. I heard some conversation about Main Street. That's a state road, and they did Clinton, which we appreciated, but a lot of those horribly shaped roads are under state control. Not all, but many of them. So these are the sorts of things I think would be productive in a session with our local legislators to really bring to the forefront, top of mind, our concerns, along with the clarifications in some of these issues. I don't know how we would ask for that from our group or what that would look like.
Let me ask this, Alderman Black. That legislative session, we had proposed a move from the March-April timeframe, which was a little bit late.
Yeah.
Felt that it wasn't as productive as it could be, so we were moving that to January timeframe. Thought about turning that into a special meeting on a Saturday morning, maybe over breakfast, but get them in before the spring legislative session. Are you proposing that maybe we reach out and see if any or all four could come and just discuss the state 20 budget, or just putting it on the radar to wait till January of 20?
I think putting on the radar to wait till January 20. I suspect if we ask for public servants to come and talk about their work on the budget, we're going to hear a lot of really good things from them and may not get some straight answers. So I'd prefer a conversation in January, and then at least what I've seen, that's been successful is not when we're just kind of talking about big ideas, but very specific policy proposals. If it is in fact true that we have to pay 6% on our revenue, perhaps then we need to get some clarification as to why and what we can do in that circumstance. So that's the January timeframe makes more sense to me. Plus, we're getting into our budget cycle, so we can start to prepare for what it looks like for us, and then they're coming into their budget negotiations. So that's my suggestion.
Can I ask, why as late as January?
Well, it actually was later, where it would have been March or April, and they are, really they're committed to whatever the spring session is already going to provide. So it actually is a little bit sooner, trying to catch them after the holiday season, but before the spring session begins. Are you proposing even sooner than that, before the holiday season?
Yeah, I would love to try to see that happen earlier. I know that there's a lot of people, especially around the legalized cannabis, that are trying to anticipate business owners and potential business owners that are trying to align to what's going to happen. I know none of us have full clarity, but I think the more that we can be proactive in positioning, the better that will turn out for us. So the sooner the better, I would think.
Okay.
Just and probably from our standpoint, as you're putting together just to support what Alderwoman Carrillo has said, perhaps as we're beginning, certainly before January, to put our budget together, maybe something sooner would be possible. We can see. Alderwoman Bray.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott. I just want to make mention that tomorrow morning there's a State of the State discussion that's being sponsored by it's the Chamber, I think, over at Hancock, the meeting room there over at ISU. So we have that opportunity to participate in those kinds of things to gather information. Additionally, you'll find that your state legislators are very willing to have discussions and talk it through with you. I know I've had some opportunity to speak with Senator Jason Barackman, and he's actually agreed to appear at ISU for a very large group of insurance professionals, the CPCU group, in November. And he'll be talking about cannabis and what it means. So Alderman Carrillo, if you're interested, we could visit perhaps after. You could get some more of that information because just because they don't present to us, we can still get the information. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Alderman Massey.
Thank you, Scott. I was just, one of our public comments was about Market Street and Main Street, which are both state routes. And I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but if we have to have state-approved motor fuel tax projects, can we have Market Street and Main Street be state-approved projects? I know this year we're working on finally getting the Hamilton Bunn situation fixed after I don't even know how many years at this point. But going into the future, can we take some of this money and can we use it to fix those roads that have been a fight for us to get the state to do anything with for as long as I've lived in the community?
I'll take it. We could, but when we talk about road and street repair, there are three buckets of money, if you will. The local motor fuel tax that we control completely. That's going to be, typically our neighborhood roads, the non-primary routes, stuff like that. Then we have two buckets that are state motor fuel tax dollars. The money that I think you're talking about, Alderman Matthey, is the one that the city spends on primary routes but not state highways. But we need IDOT approval as we're applying those funds. Market Street would fall into the category of a state route. That would be that third bucket where it's IDOT comes in and fixes it. No different than veterans. While we could use that second bucket that I mentioned, that would take away from us doing some different projects in the community that would have to be IDOT approved. But to answer your question, I think the answer would be yes. I would rather put more pressure, and we're doing this, put more pressure on IDOT fixing that Market Street west to east entry into our downtown. So the answer, long answer, but the answer could be yes. But would prefer not to take from that second bucket, if horrible way to describe it, but that second bucket of motor fuel tax money.
So basically you're saying you want them to do their job instead of us doing their job for them. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, so a little bit, right? So, okay. And that's perfectly fair. I was just thinking that, in the past that assuming the state was going to do their job hasn't been a winning proposition for us on a regular basis. So that was kind of my thinking that maybe that's something we're talking about. I don't know what other big projects we have coming down that we could use this money for, but maybe this is something we weren't expecting, and maybe we can do something there. So, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Anything else? Thanks, Mr. Gleason.
I'm done. Are we moving on to the next item?
We can move on to the next
Okay.
item as long as we're finished. Okay. Next, we have a presentation discussion regarding boards and commissions as requested by the Administration Department. There's a brief overview by Mr. Gleason and a presentation by Mr. Tyus, and then we have about a 10-minute, give or take, council discussion. Turn it over to you.
Actually, I'm going to turn this over to Deputy City Manager Tyus. Council meeting ago, this is something that was generated from council, wanted us to provide information. It's in the packet on the different boards. Curiosity as to what's the criteria. Is there a general philosophy or a general criteria for someone to serve on a different board or a commission? And then on the different types of commissions, are there specific requirements that a person has to have to be on these different boards and commissions? I know it's our practice to try to get out the information on the appointees of the mayor, pending council approval 7 days prior. Possibility that we could increase that amount to give council a longer amount of time. It's entirely up to the council. But Deputy City Manager Tyus worked on this. I'll turn it over to him. Billy?
Mayor and council members, actually ditto. He said everything I was going to say. Really, as part of the May 28th meeting, as part of a motion that was ultimately approved, you wanted to have further discussion about boards and commissions, and our goal was to provide you with information to hopefully assist in that conversation. We wanted to provide you with info related to what those commissions were and how they operate, what the process is for making appointments, if there are qualifications as defined, if that does exist. There are generally two types of boards and commissions. One type is the type that you create through the city, which are established by the city and city code, and then the others are the more community-driven, for lack of a better way to define it, whereby we have appointments, but we don't oversee those boards and commissions. There are currently 19 boards and commissions that you create, and then another 8 that are more of the community-based type of board or commission. Recommendations to boards and commissions are made by the mayor with the consent of council. Typically, as the manager said, we try at a minimum to have the information related to those appointments to you at least 7 days prior. A check of recent history outside of the last one that came about is that it's more 10 to 14 days. The last one was an anomaly in that it was a shorter window. Again, a lot of the boards are more advisory in nature, meaning that they provide you with information and recommendations. However, there are a number of boards that do have decision-making power and that actually decide things, some of which, there are appeal processes that ultimately come back to you. Efforts to recruit members, it's an ongoing process. It happens year-round generally. Sometimes we have vacancies unexpectedly. Sometimes we have situations where it's hard to get volunteers, and so there's an ongoing sort of effort to try and get people to volunteer. Generally what happens is that sometimes there's a recommendation directly from the mayor. Sometimes there are recommendations, my understanding is, from you that go to the mayor and go through the process. There's an application that is filled out. There are interviews that occur. And again, those recommendations come to you ultimately as a council by the mayor for consideration. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any. But really, our understanding was that you wanted to have a general conversation as a council.
Just as a general thing, and to add to what Billy has said, thank you very much, is that I did, as I mentioned in a memo to the council or an email to the council, did talk to Brad Cole from the Illinois Municipal League, and the common practice throughout Illinois is that the council actually gets just names. He didn't know that there were any cities that actually had forms. That was instituted by Mayor Stockton in 2011. So it's names. Some communities do have the occupation, and that's usually 48 to 72 hours. So we do have a fairly open process. Since I've been mayor, at least, anytime I sometimes get recommendations from the council, and I have been able to find somebody. If you have recommended, or previous councils have recommended somebody, I've been able to find them a position in every situation except 2, and those are 2 people who did not live in the city of Bloomington. And so that's part of it. Where there tend to be issues is where mayors do not listen to their council, or if the council recommends people, they don't go forward. Because that is one of the things. By the time somebody fills out an application, most of the work is over. I mean, at that point, we've talked to them, or I've had in some cases people vet them if I don't know who they are, or they come through a committee chair. So just to give you a little bit of background information, by the time an application is filled out, most of the work is done. And it is a constant thing where I'm trying to get people, regardless of what group I'm speaking to or talking to people, or if there happens to be a committee chair who says, hey, we really need this on this committee. The one good thing that we have is we've got a lot more younger people. We've got a lot more women. We've got people from East Side, West Side. We've got people of color as well as white people. We've got people from throughout the entire community, right, that serve on our boards and commissions. And so they look like Bloomington. Not every single board. Some are much more diverse than others. But as a group, that's certainly been the case. And so I think we've made lots of progress. And then the fact that we do have this, the concern that I would have as mayor would be, as any mayor would, I spoke to a group of mayors the other night when we had the public television, is they were somewhat surprised, but they would have shared the same thing, and that is there's a good reason why the common practice is for the council not to get into the weeds. And that is, if we all sat down and wrote up our criteria for what we think is good for each one, we would have 9 people plus a mayor coming up with different kinds of criteria, some of which might not be appropriate. And I will give a couple examples without any kind of attribution. One would be a candidate, let's say, who has run too many times and has not won. Well, if we were to put that in writing, that would violate the federal Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Illinois. We can't say, if you've exercised your constitutional right to run for office, or we don't like some of the things that you stressed as part of your right to freedom of speech, that you can no longer serve or you can't serve on any of our boards and commissions. Okay, we can't do some of those kinds of things. Or we certainly can't put them into writing. Those are the kinds of things that the mayor has to own and the mayor has to deal with, or we don't like somebody's comment at public comment in the past. That's also something we could hardly put down in writing, because that would violate a First Amendment right and consistent with our ordinance of what that's the case. Now, everybody's going to have their own different views of what may or may not be appropriate. What I try to do is, especially in the intergovernmental boards, is deal with our intergovernmental partners. Okay, county, who are you putting on? Again, especially if it's, or certainly Mayor Coos, who are you putting on the CVB? Who are you putting on Connect Transit? Who are you putting on all of these kinds of boards, so we have that issue. And then there is one, obviously the Housing Authority is yet another one. It's a separate Bloomington Housing Authority, but we have no direct control over it, and they're 5-year appointments. And they are a separate, in a sense, taxing body in government. They're not really taxing, but they receive money. We don't have any real oversight, from them. So there are a variety of different types of boards and commissions. That's just some of the backdrop. I don't mean to suggest that your presentation wasn't an excellent one. You did an excellent job, as usual. But those are just from the standpoint of the mayor, or any mayor, I think, coming into it, is trying to create a balance a variety of different interests and a variety of different opinions as they go forward. So I believe I did notice Alderman Crable first, and then Alderwoman Bray.
Just a brief clarification. So as I understand it now, the mayor names someone, and then it's the advice and consent of the council when that name is given.
That is correct.
But I noticed in some emails going back and forth on the issue, there was a reference to if a council member pulls a person from a nomination. So what does that mean? Any idea?
I haven't seen that.
I think what you're saying is, if any single council member, because it typically goes on the consent agenda, and so any single council member can pull a name.
Right, but is that a veto power then? So
by pull of name, for separate consideration. So it would not be part of the consent agenda. It would be somebody pulled out or maybe an entire set of appointments pulled out for separate consideration.
Okay.
It's not so much a veto as just, we don't want to vote on this group of appointments or a particular appointment as a group, as I understand your question. I think that's what.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions. So at this time, is staff maintaining a schedule of vacancies or upcoming vacancies for each of these boards and commissions? Is there some kind of cadence and spreadsheet being maintained?
I believe that we do have a list, but sometimes those vacancies do occur and they haven't made it to us. It doesn't happen immediately.
So staff is maintaining kind of a list of, I think I heard you say that when someone's term is up in June of 2020, that'll trigger that'll be in the schedule or the.
I believe so, but I'll double check.
Actually, I can just fill in on that. Yes, Beth Oakley does handle all that, and most all of the appointments, not all, but most all of the appointments are May 1st to April 30th. Some, like Connect Transit, are July 1st to June 30th. The regional planning coincides with the calendar year. There's at least, I'm sure, one or two out there that I'm not remembering. With almost 300 boards and commission appointments, there are lots of exceptions. But it's usually Beth who comes and says to me, Mr. Mayor, you got another vacancy.
Okay, thank you for that. So notice is given then to the mayor that there's an upcoming vacancy. Is that what
Correct.
I'm hearing from staff gives the mayor notice?
Right.
But there's no impediment or reason why notice could not be given to the council that there's an opening coming up, so that we could potentially get the word out to constituents to see if they have interest in positions that are.
If that was something that the council chose to do.
Okay. So there's, as far as you know, there's no impediment to doing such. And do you know if you know the cadence of the notice, how much in advance Beth Oakley gives notice?
Sometimes within a few minutes. I mean, literally, it's when she receives if she gets an email, she may, and I'm in the office, she may just walk down and say, there's an opening. Now
so she'll get an email if someone's stepping away, but I'm
correct.
talking about the regularly scheduled cadence of openings and some terms are up and kind of.
She has a regular thing, and although it's not always as updated as. Thank you,
Right.
Alderman. It is on the website, but because there tends to be a little bit of lag in some cases, I have often people come to me and say, "Oh, I hear there's a vacancy here. I want to be on that," and I'll say, "Sorry, actually, in some cases the council has just approved somebody, and so there's really no additional opportunity." So it is on our website. But we could, I'm sure that Beth could get something that's out. If I see it, everybody else is certainly welcome to see it. I mean, it's not that there's nothing problematic about that.
Okay, thank you for that. Because I know some of our discussions recently have been around the fact that there are some boards or commissions where we do need some significant experience or some skill sets that would be helpful that are probably in the community, but somehow we're just not aware that these openings are coming up, and so we're not having an opportunity to get the word out to all constituents. So I'm thinking perhaps, thank you for this information because it gives an opportunity to start thinking through the problem and maybe come up with some solutions at a later time. Thank you.
Let's see, Alderwoman Painter, Jamie started? Okay, all right. Jamie, Donna, and you. We'll go this way then.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you putting all this information together. So when I made the motion last week that I wanted to pull this and look at the list of all of the boards and commissions, as well as kind of what the goals are inside of those commissions. I appreciate the fact that you broke it down to which ones were enumerated by the code and what the code actually said, right? Because that means if we want to change the mission on any of those, we actually have to go through the entire process of creating a new ordinance that actually permanently changes the city code. And so I've had several conversations with people. I'm trying to figure out, I guess where I was originally trying to go with this is how do we merge the fulfilling of these commissions and put the effectively put the right people on the bus, right? We have certain things that that the council as a whole has said are important to the council. So how do we put people into those positions in such a way that they can make what we consider important and fulfill that mission going forward? And as an example would be the planning commission, right? We have a planning commission. There's great people that are on the planning commission. One of the things that council has said over the years is very important to us to prioritize infill development in the community versus continue breakneck expansion outside of what are current corporate bounds, because every time we continue to expand out, our costs are going up exponentially with travel and distance and pipes and fire, and new fire stations got to be built now, and all these costs. So if we can prioritize infill development, then that will give us the ability to optimize services to the community. And so I was really trying to put this together in my head and trying to communicate to the public of how we have these specific intentions that we want to fulfill, and how do we codify that, and maybe the real answer is, after several conversations, is that we really can't codify that. Unfortunately, is what we can do is we can communicate our expectations with the mayor, and then we can provide some guidance. And I thank you, Kim, for saying that it'd be great if we could continue to, all of us, to continue to promote, to put the right people that we think can help that. As a, transportation commission, the council has said that it's taken a vote to lower speed limits in some areas, to increase safety, to prioritize total transportation by all forms of modes of transportation, as opposed to being a strictly automobile-oriented community. So how do we find those people in the community to help move that mission forward? And so, I mean, that was my ultimate intention with this, was to talk about and list out all these boards and commissions and say, are they all doing what we want them to do? And I did have a couple ones. So the ones that I was looking at, Property Maintenance Review Board, after the tragedy and the fire that happened out off of Route 9, we wanted to make sure that we provided safe places for people to live. And I have a hearsay story, so I'm just going to say this as I was told something has happened, and I don't have proof on this, but I think it's something that we want to look into, that that particular board skews their decisions more heavily towards the building owner versus the complainant, who might have property concerns that they brought forward. So we want to make sure that, that's one I would like to review what our stance is on, and make sure that we're prioritizing safety first. Transportation Commission, I talked about that one. What are the overarching goals, and are the right people on that one for a safe community? Planning Commission, I talked about. I've gotten a lot of questions about Liquor Commission. Mayor, you are the Liquor Commissioner. I think there's still a lot of questions, as we heard tonight at public comment, about what can the Liquor Commissioner do? I think that there would be an interesting conversation at some point in the future to say, this is what you, as the Liquor Commissioner, are allowed to do by law when somebody purchases a building and comes forward. If that building has been, as we heard tonight, a liquor store in the past, and somebody already bought it and brought that forward, I I don't know what the law says if we could stop that from happening. If they don't have a history of violations, I don't know the answer to that, and I think that would be a good conversation to educate people of what we can and cannot do around, as a liquor commissioner. Two other quick notes that I just wanted to say. The Foreign Fire Insurance Board, I brought that up to you because I had never actually heard of that commission. And I just say, it's not on our website anywhere. And I would just like to say, let's get that on there and for transparency to make sure it's there with all their links to all their meeting notes and everything. And then the last one, and this is, I'm bringing this up not as a concern originally, but something interesting to talk about going forward. I don't know if we can do this or not, but we have separate fire and police pension boards, and I would like to actually see and possibly have the conversation if those can be combined. My experience is that a larger pool of money can be invested more efficiently with less overhead costs, which means more of the money actually goes where we want it to, which is to our employees eventually, if we can get some maintenance fees and all those sorts of things out of the way. So I think at some point in the future it would be interesting to have a conversation. There may be legal reasons we cannot do that, but let's find that out and let's talk about that. And so I appreciate you bringing this forward, and you know, I had asked everybody if they had any problems with any of the commissions, and I think that really my ultimate goal of codifying some of this stuff is not going to be possible, but I think we now all have a much better understanding of what all the boards are, what's in the code of what they can do, and then we can make our expectations clear to the mayor about how to drive this forward. The one piece of this that I will bring a council agenda or for probably next month is that I want to actually put in the code that we do have an application process that has to be circulated to the council 14 days before it makes it on agenda, because Mayor Renner has courteously continued a best practice that I consider from Mayor Stockton. But if Mayor Renner chooses not to run for mayor again in the future, will the next mayor do that for us? And I would like to see that be written in that this is just how we do it. I really don't care if other cities don't do it because I don't represent other cities. I represent Bloomington, and this is how I want to see Bloomington operate. So thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, and I think I just would say that's a great idea. Yeah, and that was sort of my implication. But let's see, Alderwoman Boland and then Alderwoman Painter.
I just have some questions. Which of these boards are, I guess, statutory that we absolutely have to have? I do know that the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Commission, but
Yes. And actually, there are certain requirements that we have certain things happen as it relates to certain actions. And what I mean by that is that, say for instance, you have a request for a zoning change. You have to have an entity that helps a public hearing. And so
okay.
Usually that's the Planning Commission, and in our case that's the Planning Commission as well. Zoning board, there has to be an avenue for people to appeal zoning decisions as well, and so the zoning board handles that, or requests for like variances to the rules. In terms of which ones are statutory, the police pension board, a police pension board, and a fire pension board are required as per statute as well.
Mr. Boyle, anything else that occurs to you offhand? I mean, obviously you have to have a liquor commission. Well, the mayor could just be the liquor commissioner, but anything else we have to have?
Not really much. I mean, there is also the Board of Fire and Police and several other, there are the Planning Commission, the Zoning Commission, as Billy stated. Almost, I would say probably half our boards, in a sense, have a genesis in state law.
Okay.
And then, in terms of, like the Planning Commission, yeah, we have it in the ordinance, but we also have it in the state, coming from the state law. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Painter and then Millawambwe.
Speak to Jamie
Question about the fire pension board and the police pension board. There are two people on those boards, and they're staff only. I believe there are finance director and somebody else, and they're the same two people. So if that answers your question.
Maintained as completely separate accounts, though, that each have their own administrative fees and stuff?
I don't know.
They are. Actually, the fire pension board is an Article 4 statutory pension board. Police is Article 3. And both have five-member boards, two active from either the fire service or police service, one retiree from each. And then the mayor, with council approval, has two appointees.
Just to clarify, we have over the years gotten, like since I've been mayor, gotten rid of boards and commissions in some cases, or consolidated them that where it made sense. In fact, most recently, the council voted to get rid of the police. What's the name of the commission that where they were involved in hiring? In the hiring, and this came actually from former commissioners who said, this really is something that HR should handle and the police department. And I think Tim and I don't know if Billy was involved in the conversation, we said, if the people who serve on it don't think we should have it, then maybe we shouldn't have it. And so I don't think there was even a peep. It also, frankly, helps a little bit because that's always the commission that's tough to get, because it says you have to have, this is Illinois, speaking of what Scott said, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent. Given that we don't have party registration, it's not really clear what that means. Does that mean if you're the Democratic person, you can only vote in Democratic primaries? And the same thing with Republicans. Does an independent have to keep voting in each party's primary, or just not vote in primaries at all? It was a real mess. And we could never really get a straight answer out of it. So as the mayor, I was thrilled to see that commission go away. But anyway, and then very early on, I think in 2013, we combined quite a few of the building commissions that the city manager at that time recommended.
Which is a good thing, because, when you mentioned the IML handbook, I went and read it, and it says that you should really proceed with caution with a lot of your boards and commissions, because it says, first, the non-elected resident was not elected. Including them on a board or council committee can be legally problematic if there is no authority for the powers you may delegate to them. Second, it is difficult reaching a consensus with 5, 7, or 9 board or council members. It generally becomes more difficult when you add a dozen or more non-elected residents to the mix. Too many cooks can indeed spoil the broth, if not the entire municipality. Third, the level of commitment of non-elected residents can vary widely. While some can be quite dedicated, others often skip or miss meetings or do not adequately prepare for them, and there is little you can do to force their participation. Fourth, committees may often have a limited or singular vision associated with their issue, while the board is responsible for balancing many competing demands and often needs to see the big picture, even at the expense of a singular vision. Finally, remember that committee members can be hurt or angry if the board does not accept their recommendations, which has happened in the past.
Right.
And
All
it
good
says,
points, yes.
whatever meeting structure you use, it should result in consensus and clear directions to those people responsible for carrying out your decisions.
Right. Well, and I think that's, especially if you've got clearer situations like, I think as Alderman Matthey mentioned, in terms of planning. Our comp plan says infill. We've got lots of, infill is one of those things that presumably someone would buy into if they were interested in serving on planning. And I think that's the case and has been the case for many years now in terms of the people who are on there. But some definitely do have that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I do agree that I think that it's a really good idea if the council gets a little more involved in selecting the people. And, outreach is really important.
Right. And that's another reason why, as I say, I think as Alderwoman Bray had suggested, um, if I've got a list of board and commission members that are perhaps up to date, absolutely, because the some as has been noted in the IML, the same thing with elected officials. Some elected officials are much more historically diligent about sending board and commission or members' names or doing their job generally, and some people I've gotten none from for years and years, not even a single recommendation, whereas others are constantly feeding me, names. Now, of course, if everybody feeds me names, that in some respects that's a good thing, except then there'll be more disappointed people, I suppose, because it'd be harder to find them. But no, I thank you. That's all points extremely good. Alderwoman, excuse me.
Yes,
I'm sorry. Were you finished? Alderman Milawambwe.
thank you. Okay, so this is something that's not fully formed yet, but I'll just go ahead and say it because it's informed by my experience, when I was appointed. And what I ended up doing was to, take some time, and I was advised to do that. It was more informal. I don't think there was anything in the code that required it, but I was advised to, to visit with different council members just so they could get to know me, get to understand what my vision was for the city and the work that I was expected to do. And so in this particular case, I think we oftentimes, and I don't know how practical it is, but I think in some cases it might be helpful for us to be able to do that, to be given the opportunity to visit with those particular individuals who are appointed to, different boards and commissions, depending on how compelled, we feel to do that, because then we can get a better understanding of what it is that they want to accomplish for the city. The written process is great because we have something in writing about what it is that they like to do. But I think when you engage somebody in conversation, then you have a much better understanding of who they are as a person and what their goals are. Because it always goes beyond what's written. So that's just something that I wanted to put up as a suggestion for all of us to be able to do in the future.
Alderwoman Carrillo, and then Alderman Black.
He was first. You can go first.
I'll go ahead.
Okay. So I am in agreement that council should play a role and would like to see us be notified via email, but also is this something that could be included as part of either the city manager's report or just the mayor's comments on a regular basis, so we make it a part of our culture to notify both the council members and the public that these openings are coming up?
Yeah, if that's the direction of council, definitely can do that.
Because it's great for us to have it in our email, but I do think it's important that goes out, and I'd like to see us all be a part of recruiting and doing outreach. That said, I have some concerns about folks feeling the onus to have to visit with council members, and I know you said this wasn't something that was required, and it's not a bad idea. But I do want to make sure that we keep it from devolving into a situation where people feel like they have to really make their case and appeal to council members. Like, I just don't want it to turn into a who do you know versus your qualifications and your interest in serving the city on a board and commission. So I think that there is a healthy balance that can be struck there, because there are going to be people that maybe we don't know, we've never heard of, but who are recent arrivals to our community, or who just want to, it's time for them to step up and make a contribution, and I don't want to see them be discouraged, maybe because they don't have the same level of relationship with the folks up here as some others. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. Just in related to that, sometimes it always depends on the nature of what it is. There are very often times we still have vacancies where, like Property Maintenance Review Board, the tenant slot, right, has been vacant for years. And that's probably why, if there's a bias to the decisions, that has happened. And that's a notoriously difficult slot to find people. But I'm just using that as one example. But there are times where lots of people want to be on the library board. Lots of people want to be on planning and zoning. Not necessarily so much some of the less sexier boards and commissions, I suppose, is the way to put it. Alderman Black. I'm sorry.
So how do we, I saw Jamie nodding his head and maybe some others, but how do we actually go about indicating that that's something we'd like to move forward? Do we need to put that as a motion on a regular council agenda?
It depends on exactly, I would say, on what specifically you're looking for. What we can do is certainly, as Beth, usually it's January or so, says, all of these boards and commissions are available, and all of these appointments are coming forward. That's where the big, mother lode of appointments starts out. Probably we could do that even in December if people are beginning to think about who might be good on this board or this commission, who's eligible. In other words, it's about a third of the board and commission members, so there's about 100 that come available, not counting people who might be resigning. And so there's usually kind of one time where all that hits, and that could certainly, when I get the memo or when I get the list, that's when
Mayor, we got a written city manager report that comes out every month. Can it be included as a last page of that written city manager report that here are the board and commission slots that'll be opening up in the next 90 days?
We could.
And then if we just keep an updated
we
list
could.
of...
The difficulty, the only thing I would say with 90 days is it could be somebody that resigns the next day, and then it's stale.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you that could happen, but at least we're starting a process where we know if we know somebody's rolling off and they said I'm not interested in renewing when my spot comes around, we can start. Right. There will always be exceptions to every rule we create, but if we just put it on that, maybe it's the next 30 days. I mean, we can at least...
Well, the things that we know as of that date of the report.
Yeah, but I mean, we already have this written city manager report that comes out. We just attach it as the last page where we and the public know where that can be found every month.
Right.
And just above that we would then make it a part of the oral report that is given at council meetings as well.
Right. Alderman Black.
Thank you. And thank you, Billy, for standing up there for as long as you've been up there. So maybe I've been watching too much West Wing over the years, and I had the opportunity to see both my mom and my dad this weekend, and it makes me think of both of them. And Alderwoman Carrillo's comments made me think as well. So when I was growing up, and I think I've mentioned this before, my mother would always take a walk with me after dinner, and we would talk about politics. And no matter what I was yammering about, she would take the opposite opinion and then force me to think about issues differently. And I really valued that. And she would tell you that it was real touch and go during the George W. Bush years, but she was able to make me think differently. And I think there's value in hearing other opinions and getting as many people involved in the community, even those with whom I have very vehement political disagreements or we don't share the same political philosophy, because at the end of the day, we all just want to make Bloomington a better place. And so as Alderwoman Carrillo was kind of talking about, making sure that we're not creating a who-you-know type situation, and we want to get people who may be new transplants to the community, getting people who are involved that may not be before. I couldn't help but think of Alderman Sage, who would say often that you want to be intellectually honest about yourself and the philosophies that you're putting out there. And so, this conversation to me has been about kind of impetus with Connect Transit and some of the council accountability with some of the appointments. And I got to say I was really disappointed to see that some folks went over to a potential appointee's place of business to say, withdraw your name or else we'll publicly shame you, essentially. And I don't like that. I think that's, even for a group with whom I generally agree with most of the concerns they have, I don't want to live in a community where somebody who volunteers their time comes forward and is basically, put in a position where, at their place of employment has to defend themselves, especially for a volunteer job where, they're just trying to make the community better. I think that onus comes to the council, and that's kind of why we have the checks and balances where the mayor can make his appointments, and we can ultimately turn them down. And I agree with Terry that he has the power to make the appointments, and we ultimately have to sign off on them as we should. I think that's the way it has to be. And if there's concerns that council members have, they can voice those. And if people in the community have concerns about specific individuals, they can share them with us, and we're happy to listen. I know that we've done that in the past. So I guess this has been more of a kumbaya session about things that we want to see happen here. I hope the staff has gotten what they need, but I kind of want to get a little bit more brass tacks about some stuff, because I think the part of this conversation that really got going is some frustration about some things. So taking kind of, let's think of ourselves here in 20 years from now. Let's suppose the mayor decides that they don't want to appoint someone to fill a vacancy, and the community wants those vacancies filled. What is the council's role, responsibility, power in that circumstance?
I think, George, if you can answer, my understanding is you can't do anything. I mean, you could shame the mayor publicly, but that's about it, right?
That's correct. The ordinances are are clear that the mayor does the appointing and the council does the advising and consenting.
So in that circumstance, even if the mayor decided, I don't want to put these folks up, we're going to create a vacancy on a board or commission, the council really isn't empowered to do anything at that point in time?
Not formally, no.
Not formally. Okay. Yeah, see, I think that was one of the questions that we had last time, and I know that I've gotten it from other folks more recently, but everything that Jamie was saying, I agree with him on some of the reviewing those boards and commissions. I think when we talk about appointing people of a certain, I guess, representation, when it comes to whether it be like we did it for transportation and disability advocates, we can bake that into the ordinance. I think we should start doing that as a methodical way. Definitely important. I don't think it's the most urgent of our needs, but we can, everything that you mentioned, I'd definitely be on board with reviewing as a really good starting point. So thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah,
I'll go right to you. I just wanted to comment on what he had to say, and then just kind of piggyback off that. We actually do have, in a comparative context, a very clear, clean process. And by that I mean, when I came in, there were 58 either expired terms or vacancies. And that the difficulty there was, and this is many mayors. Some people had not been reappointed in 30 years, 20 years. 15 years. And so in addition to not leaving vacancies, in a sense the the practice was, you want to stay on, I don't even bring you to the council. And according to our ordinances and state laws, you just continued to serve. The downside, there's a lot of downsides to that. One is it robs the council of its role in the checks and balance situation, but it also created in some commissions, a culture of entitlement, because you had never really been held accountable by the mayor or the city council. You just continued to serve if you wanted to go forward, and that's why we still have fixed terms. We had fixed terms, but now the normal process is you get a letter. Do you want to reapply? So there's, and I don't know that I've turned anybody down, but we do have some, George, if I'm not mistaken. If somebody doesn't show up to a certain number of meetings, at least on some boards, can't they be removed? Because we have done that a couple times since I've been mayor.
That is correct.
I'm sorry. Or Bill, maybe you know that.
No, it's fine. There are certain causes for recall or termination.
Right.
Unexcused absences for 2 consecutive regular meetings or 3 meetings in a 12-month period, or excessive absences from meetings, or tardiness or conduct unbecoming a person. There are several things that can lead to recalling a person on a board or commission or termination.
The ones that we have used, and I don't remember all of them, but it's just as when I would have a committee chair come to me and say, hey, I have troubles with a quorum. I got one person who's resigned, and I got somebody who never shows up. So, if I've got somebody absent or whatever, there are problems. And so we have, that I should say it's mainly been either people on the ground who are the chairs, or Beth or others noting the attendance. So there are some things that certainly we can do. And then very often when there's a group of appointees, and we have several groups of appointees, some get a 3-year appointment, some get a 2-year appointment, some get just a 1 year or several months. Sometimes if there's any question, the person that I might have the most question about, and that wouldn't just be me, but even with the council, we give the shortest amount of time to. And if they turns out they're not showing up or there are issues, then they don't get reappointed. And certainly that's one tactic I've used. That's certainly something that other mayors have used. And that's where I'm touching base with the council. You got some issues with this person. And sometimes people flower when they're on a commission. Sometimes they don't. I'm sorry, Alderwoman Painter.
I just have a question for George Boyle. If the mayor has the last word on this and we don't have any say in it, why are we forced to vote on these things? I mean, why doesn't he just do it? Why do we have to vote on it? I mean, and really, I mean, these people are appointed to do our homework for us and to help us out. So why do we have no say? And why is it all the mayor's say? And why do we have to vote on it?
Well, first of all, I mean, one reason is that it's in our ordinances that's, how it's set up. It's part of the city manager form of government in the way that it's constructed here, that the mayor makes those choices, but it says with the consent of the council. So as the mayor pointed out before, there are times when it's possible for a name to be pulled off this consent agenda and for council to not give its consent, and that probably would block. In some instances, that would block the appointment power.
Okay, thank you.
So
George.
because it's an and, it's not kind of a just advisory. It has that ability, but the mayor does have the appointment power.
Yeah, just to add to that, so in other words, the way that it's structured is that they're going to. No, I'm just saying that the abuses, though, that are possible. I shouldn't say abuses. Things which maybe some people use it as an abuse, but
I got it.
if you don't replace somebody, that can be a problem. Right. Okay. Alderman Matthey, and then Cuddy.
So I think it was Alderwoman Bray.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So as we've talked through some of these dynamics of boards and commissions, it strikes me that there are actually some differences between some of the boards and commissions that what I consider, I'll call it substantive positions that these particular groups, those who serve Bloomington in the larger community, that would be the group that substantively we would like them to execute on our collective vision as they serve on the CVB or they serve on Connect Transit, because they're representing us and Bloomington's interest in the larger community and in the region. And I would kind of juxtapose that with the boards and commissions that only serve Bloomington. And as we think about solving for the problem of getting the best people aligned for the various boards and commission positions, I think maybe we should also keep our eye on a process wherein not only do we seek to get the right folks representing us regionally, but we also have an opportunity then to meet and talk with them while they're serving, and then have them come back and get debriefed from us on some philosophies and thoughts, just to have kind of a continuous conversation about their representation of Bloomington on these regional, on these regional boards and commissions. And, I'm not criticizing what has or hasn't been done up to now, but we're talking through where things are in regards to getting people on boards and commissions, and then I'm thinking forward, once they're on the board and commission, then what are our expectations and how can we see that they're executing on our philosophies, especially in a regional type position. Have you seen anything like that before, Deputy City Manager?
Well, I think that the level of involvement of a council varies by board council. I mean, and how heavily you want to be involved. It's absolutely in your prerogative. to be able to meet with board members and have conversations
Actually,
with
Alderman Black just mentioned had reached out to Connect Transit people and spoken with
Yes,
them. Sure.
so absolutely. I mean, different people are going to want to have different levels of involvement. However, you are correct in that it's important that boards and commission members understand your direction in terms of what you want to see happen.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
And then Alderman Massey.
I missed one point on my scribbled page of notes here that I just wanted to bring up too. So when I bring back my alderman request form next month about the 14 days, I'm also going to work with Jeff on trying to design some conflict of interest language for our boards and commissions too, because I want to make sure that the people who are currently serving, when they're renewing, and the people that we are bringing forward as potential, appointees, that we make sure that we're very clear about possible conflicts of interest in terms of, if it, I'll work on it with Jeff. I just wanted to bring it up
I think we have that already, don't we? I mean, doesn't every board and commission member have to fill out Mr. Boyle, with the clerk's office?
So some of so I'm on the Cultural Commission. I fill that form out. We all fill that form out every year, right?
Right.
And mostly that form is about if you're, it has a lot to do with money and where the money comes from, and that's not necessarily the only type of conflict of interest that I'm interested in making sure that we're clear about. I'll work with Jeff on it, and we'll get that out to everybody prior to we get there to make sure that we have some clear definitions of what that is. And I guess it's hard to put in context right now, but I have some concerns I'll work with Jeff on. I just wanted to bring it up. So.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. Alderman Milwaukee.
Oh, okay. Sure. And what Alderwoman Bray brought up made me think of, go back to what I said earlier in terms of visiting with different individuals. And it makes me think of, how do we handle, people that we have a disagreement with the direction that they're taking on some of those boards. Eventually, if we don't agree with how that they're not representing us in the right way. But I think that also goes to the folks, coming in, first time. Because I remember last time when we talked about our in our conversation, we talked about wanting to avoid those folks being embarrassed, and being denied on the floor. So how do we? So that's something that we need to think about. How do we manage that behind the scenes? Because I can think of, for example, what happens with the U.S. Senate, where people have an opportunity to visit with different senators and ahead of time to see if, and it doesn't mean that people agree on everything, but there are areas where there's not going to be, where, folks will say, no, this is it, this is the limit, this is the barrier, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to approve, this particular appointment, or they might just agree to disagree in some areas and then, agree to put forward that particular appointment. So that's something that I think we do need to think about. Because I think those folks, whether internally or outside, they contribute to the larger work of the council and how we want to be perceived publicly. So it's absolutely important that we make sure, whether they agree with us or not, it's not about agreement with every position, but it's people who understand how to be, how to disagree without being disagreeable.
And I think one of the things there is that because these are all, or almost all, of the appointments are people who would make, certainly the internal ones in Bloomington, make recommendations to us. One way to send a message is to say no. And we've done that on many occasions. But Alderwoman Emig.
Yeah, just to summarize, might be useful. Will help me. So at this point, we've agreed that there will be an added communication on the city manager's report as much as possible about upcoming vacancies on boards. There will also be a process for codification of the applications for boards, as well as a 14-day review time, potentially codification. I mean, that's what kind of moving in that direction. And perhaps some refined language on conflict of interest. And finally, back to Alderman Bray's point, there might be a mechanism for certainly our city boards, the 19 city boards we have, or perhaps the boards that are enacting more substantive policy, that there be some kind of reporting back mechanism or an opportunity for them to communicate to us highlights and perhaps goals. I know we get agendas and minutes, but perhaps something more, speaking more to the mission of the boards is something to consider in the future. Did I capture? Okay.
Mike, yeah.
Right, we're landing on this 14, and I think that may just be a little shy. I think we need to maybe look at a 30-day window rather than a 14-day window.
The difficulty of the
review and
30-day
get
window
back
is
to you.
sometimes with the, I mean, at least as mayor, frankly, it seemed like 14 days was a lot, but because there's sometimes where we really need, I mean, obviously, if the council decides what the council decides, but there's sometimes where we need appointees to happen more quickly.
Well, sure, when there's
yeah.
an immediate,
Right.
vacancy, but
Right.
we're talking about setting out something here, possibly even 6 months in advance. We're going to hear that, in first quarter, we're going to hear end of second quarter, there are going to be vacancies. So once we start beating the bushes for folks and getting folks to step forward, then we have a possibility for, some names to go in, and then within 30 days of bringing something forward, we're just notified, so we have an opportunity to think it through. I don't know, my opinion is 14 days is too short.
So my opinion of why I had said 14 days originally is that there are several boards that if they had somebody withdraw, let's say they got transferred out of town for work or whatever, they could potentially not meet because they couldn't have a quorum. So 14 days gives us the time to try to find somebody that the mayor has already vetted and said, yes, this person I would like to put forward. Then he sends it to us. We have time, 14 days before it makes it onto an agenda, and hopefully we can get somebody into the next monthly meeting of that commissioner board so that they can actually have their meeting because they have a quorum. That's where I was coming out with 14 days. So, I mean, it's still probably 30 days with 14 days on the mayor's side to find the right person, have the communication, and get there, then 14 more days for us. So, but that was where I was coming from with 14 days, just so you know.
So
And if I could just clarify on that,
you're solving for
very
the
often I get it.
situation in regards to having someone who's an emergency appointment versus I'm trying to focus in on a regular cadence of these are known
Yeah, I'm
appointments.
just thinking
known,
this is the minimum. 14 is the minimum days, right?
So, there's two situations there. I guess I don't know that we need the emergency situation to govern the overall cadence and the scheduling and just get something that's very workable.
I'm amenable to either way, but that's where I was coming out with 14 days.
Just to clarify, I usually get information. It's not like that I'm getting these, as I say, it's getting applications. It's rare that an application comes in that I just go ahead and recommend to the council. It's usually because somebody continues to reach out or has reached out, or that I get from the council nominees. Some of our best nominees have come from the council. Have introduced me to, oh, hey, you need to know person X. They really are very good at this. I think they'd be good on any one of these kinds of commissions. Or maybe they start on a less salient commission, and then maybe when there's a vacancy, they move to something else. So and sometimes it's from the chairs. Very often, same thing like cultural district, right? Very often, Vicki Tilton, recommended somebody I put them forward, right? Sometimes it depends on the chair and the situation. In fact, it always depends on that. So anyway. I'm sorry, and Jen, Alderwoman Carrillo.
Yeah, I want to raise the concern and the tension that I'm feeling around where the conversation is headed, and I am fearful that we are making it an unspoken requisite to be a part of a board and commission and to work for the city that you have to be agreeable, or that even, I don't necessarily know that we've really grappled with the fact that like there are going to be people that we don't personally like or that we would prefer not to work for. But I was just concerned to hear that we want to find people who can disagree without being disagreeable. I don't think being disagreeable should be a prerequisite or it should be something that precludes somebody from serving on a board. And I just want us to be careful that we don't continue to head down that road, because I don't think that leads to the types of diverse boards that we need to actually represent the folks in the community. I also think, this question about whether we embarrass people by having open conversation about whether they are qualified to serve on a board and commission. I mean, personally, I don't find, being polite to be more valuable than being transparent. I would rather that we as elected representatives live up to the expectation of the public to have a transparent system of appointments than I would be to bend that process in order to spare somebody who is willingly putting their name forward the embarrassment of us having a very frank discussion about whether we believe that they are the right people for the position. That's my sense in terms of the appointment, and I also just want to respectfully disagree with Councilmember Black around the action that the folks at CEF took a couple of weeks ago around the transportation issues. I wouldn't be able to sit here in good conscience and not raise up the fact that the folks who took action, many of whom are in the room today and were in the room, are also doing public service in the same way that people who are in boards and commissions are doing public service and are honoring an enormous legacy of civil disobedience and direct action that is arguably the only thing that has led to social justice and social progress in this country. And so I do not want to see those people vilified. And I have a personal relationship with the business owner whom they visited, and I don't think that was probably very pleasant for him, but I do think that the consequences that will come to him pale in comparison to the consequences that will come to people with disabilities, poor people, elderly people in our community who will suffer when they see their bus service and their bus access decreased.
Okay. Alderwoman Boland, we haven't heard from you. Wow.
I believe the purpose for becoming familiar with these people that serve on the board, they're going to be doing our homework. They're going to be going out. That's their role, is to go out, talk to people, do the research, and come back to us with a solution, if that's what we've assigned them to do. And to address the issue of making a scene, I agree with Alderman Mumbau. I can't say Umboka, okay? No, I'm not being disagreeable. I'm agreeing right now. There's certain decorum, and I think there's also certain faith that we need to put out in the public. We are now elected officials. We are no longer private citizens. And to be frank, sometimes I get very embarrassed as part of this council from the behavior of members on this council. So I've just said my piece, and thank you.
Okay. One of the things that certainly, in terms of recruiting people, pardon me?
Out of order?
What's out of order?
You're out of order if you're going to respond to me.
I'm talking generally about boards and commission appointments. But I don't know that I would be out of order to respond to you. But essentially, I think one of the difficulties would be that if we were to have a history of rejecting people in the city, would be that, one, at the very least, it's going to be harder to recruit people for boards and commissions. And that's a difficulty. And so, while I agree with much of what Alderwoman Carrillo has said, that I
Point
think
of
is a
order,
difficulty.
Mayor.
Mm.
Mayor, point of order, as the,
Well, actually, we've
as-
got so
as
many
the
points of order.
chair-
We've gone half an hour or so here.
But Mayor, as the chair of this meeting, it's not your role to weigh in on each and every comment from each and every alder person. Instead, you should be
Right.
facilitating each of the aldermen and women
Right.
and alderpersons in their commentary. It is not your role to weigh and balance and comment on each and every comment. And I think so I would agree with Alderwoman Bolin in that point, and ask you to
Right.
please desist. Thank you.
Right. Well, first of all, I would disagree with the point of order. It is, according to the mayor decides who speaks and when and for how long.
It's a point of order because the time limit was 10 minutes discussion. We're now an hour. We're now an hour past.
So almost everybody's been point of order.
You are interrupting me. I have the floor. Sorry. We're almost an hour past the adjournment time. We've been discussing and talking back and forth with a lot of filler. I appreciate all the discussion that's been going on, but it's not necessary for the mayor to keep summarizing what the council members have to say.
And I appreciate that that's your opinion on that, but
Out of order?
No, you can continue to say out of order, but that doesn't make it out of order.
Well, we can call a motion to bring this matter to a close.
Second.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, at this point, everybody was out of order because we've been talking way, way too long. I let it go.
Let's go.
Okay. So, at this point,
There's a motion, a second, a motion to close debate.
we can do that. Are we actually, Mr. Boyle, can we actually vote on anything tonight?
To close this discussion.
I don't, to move on. Okay. Is that what is that the motion? Okay. All right.
What I suggest with respect to the time, that, Chapter 2, Section 18.2 talks about not running beyond the allotted time without a motion. I think, and a vote by the majority of the council to continue speaking and debate. Absent that, I think it might just be possible to just call the next item and move on, unless there is a motion to continue debate.
Unless there's a motion to continue? Okay.
To continue the discussion,
Okay.
right. So maybe
All right.
at this point you could just...
At this point, we move on to another non-controversial subject, and that is the city manager's, the city manager's report should be non-controversial, right? And then we move to item 8B, which is a council initiative. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just quick comment. The agenda item that we know, the regular agenda item that we know that will be coming on the 24th, there's only one at this point, and it's a required IMRF retirement reporting. So that's the only one. I'll turn this over to the council initiative that was brought forward by Alderman Crable.
Alderman Crable, you got the floor.
Thank you. I got up today, got in my car, drove to work. I was able to go out to lunch, do some errands, and that's not the case for many people in this community. On Saturday, I met some wonderful people, Carol Bradley, who tried to speak tonight, Mary Melvin, and others at Orlando Northbrook Estates who are disabled, who live on fixed incomes. They have it much harder, and we shouldn't be doing something that makes it even harder for them. They want and deserve to live a full life. Now, I believe in public transit, but I think public transit should first and foremost serve transit-dependent people, not choice riders. While I was able to use a wheelchair to go that half mile from where the bus stop will be removed to where the Main Street bus stop is. That's just a sliver of the experience that disabled riders would have to have if that route was removed. I appreciate Isaac making a proposal to try to fix that, but I don't think it goes far enough, although I have not fully considered it. But keep in mind, would he have brought up that solution without the public comment that we've had from all the SEFT members, without my initiative. And so, you know, this alternative was not brought up earlier when we were having public comments in meetings. So, and I don't think when we're bringing up a little bit about the board discussion, committee discussion, I don't think that these changes would have made it past the Connect Transit Board if there was representation by ridership. So my initiative is to use Section 8 of the intergovernmental agreement we have the power under that agreement to reject the budget. And the purpose of me rejecting the budget is to stop these changes, both the olive route elimination and the fare increase. Just a little bit about the history of the olive route. We've heard some of that tonight. I don't know if it was designed to fail, but I would say it was designed in a way that it would fail, meaning that if you look at the history, this route was only added at the last minute to the 2016 changes based on public outrage. This is the only route that doesn't go to a transfer station, and it sits 30 minutes idle where it could go to a station. It only runs every hour, and most of the stops, if not all, are not ADA compliant. So those are all strikes against having high ridership. Also, you have an alternative that would have taken the olive route to a transfer station that was put up by John Bowman, who is a current member of the Transit Board, and Mr. McCurdy, who is the chairman of the Connect Transit Board, told other transit board members, to disregard because they should only be considering things from Connect Transit. Despite these challenges, the overall average of riders per hour on the olive route is 8.7. Four other routes, tan, orange, brown, blue, all of which go to a transfer station, average similar RPHs of 8.3 to 10.3.
Jeff, Alderman Crable, point of order. You're well past your 3 minutes.
You're well past your 3 minutes.
So
really?
you had 3 minutes to just
And
put
that's
your
it.
initiative
Yeah,
forward to see if we would talk more about this.
Right.
About your,
So
your
when
initiative.
Within 3 minutes?
Well past 3 minutes, but
You're well
I'll tell you what, I'll give you about, how about another 30 seconds to wrap your argument up?
How about 1 minute?
30 seconds.
45 seconds.
Going once, going twice.
All right. So I would say on fare increases, we need to focus on other ways that we can possibly avoid those fees. I think we have an obligation that we haven't been meeting as a council. These are all major changes that we haven't approved. And I think we can do better. I think the lives of dependent riders depend on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we have 3 minutes, but I suspect this is going to be more than 3 minutes of council. It's really not discussion. It's, do we want this to go forward? And I'll start with Alderman Black, because I see his first, and then Alderwoman Painter.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jeff, for bringing this forward. I have not decided if I'm going to say yes or no to this request. I'm very interested to hear the thoughts of my colleagues on this one, and I just kind of want to share where I'm at, and I'm like to hear everybody weighing in. First of all, I just want to make it crystal clear that if someone were to not want this on the agenda next week, it does not equate to support of the fare increases and does not equate to the support of the elimination of the olive route, and it does not equate to the idea that we're not going to be going back with Connect Transit. I want to be crystal clear on that. My concern here is entirely practical. I have not gotten a clear answer from really anybody who's in a legal position to tell me that what's going to happen if the council rejects the budget. I've heard people say it's not going to be as bad as we think, but I did listen to the president of Connect Transit say that it would be devastating and that service would have to end at some point in time. So I guess from our own legal opinion, is this something that George or staff can speak to? What is the practical implications if the council were to move forward with Alderman Crable's request, and we put it on agenda and we vote to reject the budget? What then happens?
I wish that we could give you a clear answer, but Jeff Jurgens and I have considered it and read through the intergovernmental agreement, the ordinance that is the Connect Transit ordinance. And there's no precedent, in this relationship or under this ordinance for rejecting the budget. And all that the agreement says is in the event the budget is rejected, the city staff, the city will cooperate with Connect Transit in drafting a new budget. And that's it. So it would be nice to give you a solid answer one way or the other, or something more definite than that, but we, at this point, don't have that.
So okay, so we don't know what that would logistically look like. Okay. Has Normal weighed in on this? Is this on their agenda at some point?
Not, no.
It's not. Is there any
I'm
interest
just saying
in...
that just because we need to...
I know.
Others will need to talk.
Yeah, I will, I'm fine for now, so I'll listen.
Alderwoman Painter.
Well, I agree with Alderman Black. There has been no clear indication of what would happen, and I really don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. However, I am not in agreement with what Connect Transit has done as far as eliminating the olive route and raising their prices, especially because of their funding has increased exponentially in the last 5 years. There's no excuse that all of this is happening. The intergovernmental agreement is rather at cross purposes with itself. Although it says that Connect Transit can raise fees whenever they want, it also says that major change in the level of its service or deviation from its budget, such change or deviation shall not take effect until approved by the corporate authorities of Bloomington and Normal, and that's the two councils. And this has never been brought before us. I think it should be, and I think we should vote it down. And the budget notwithstanding, they can make those changes in their plans and make everything go back the way that it was, and then perhaps we can, forge a better way in the future. That's what I would like to see happen. Thank you.
Alderman Milawambwe, and then Matthew, and then if we go beyond that, we'll need a...
Sure. I'm also not in favor of the initiative because I just don't want to wade into the unknown. Not enough is known at this time. But I do agree that we do need to look at some of these changes, because as I look at the mission of Connect Transit, it says that they provide access to opportunities for residents, and I feel like with these changes, many people are kind of cut out of those opportunities, and I don't think it's fair. I think I know we have done as a council, we have paid for many other things that we could we could stand to reject as well, but make sure that folks have access to a service that they need. So at this point, I'm not in favor of the initiative.
Okay. Alderman Mathy.
George, I have a question for you. Is there, if this initiative moves forward, and between now and next Monday, are we going to have a more definitive legal opinion by next Monday, or next Monday when we ask you or Jeff the same question of what happens, if the budget is rejected, is there anything like additional? You have more people to talk to. Is there anywhere where we're going to be in a different legal position by next Monday, or is your answer next Monday going to be the same of we're not sure what happens if the council votes the budget down?
Well, there are things that can happen between now and then that may involve discussions, right, between folks. But in terms of the ordinance or the interpretation of the ordinance, that will not be any different. We may be able to analogize from talking to colleagues about, a similar situation, but we're not going to have, I really, and, I hate to be a pessimist about it, but being realistic about it, I don't think we're going to have a different interpretation of this particular ordinance.
Okay. Thank you, George. I really appreciate that. So given that, then I would tend to agree with Alderwoman Painter that I don't want to see us unintentionally do something that causes a lot more drastic change than we want to, but that at the same time does not mean that the council can't use its oversight to step in and say, we have expectations, and you need to meet those expectations, right? The board has delayed all changes and everything until October, and that gives us time for them to respond to changed expectations from this board, if that's what indeed we have. So in knowing, or based on what Georgia said, I won't be supporting this initiative, but I do have expectations that have changed, so.
Okay. All right. Can we go ahead and have a motion, since we've got a couple people who want to speak? I know, but before we go.
Mayor, I'll move that we extend the conversation by 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Second.
Second. Okay. Madam Clerk, actually, you don't have to call the roll. I can just go ahead and vote if you're in favor of extending this for 10 minutes. Okay. Motion carries 9-0. We're extending 10 minutes. Okay. Thanks. Alderwoman Bray, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So I think Alderman Matthey hit on, by and large, what I wanted to comment on, and that's basically that I think we need to focus on the things that we know need to be fixed. Are the route servicing, the folks that need it? Are we looking after all segments of the public transit mission that we've given? And, are these rates fair considering our riders? When we go into an arena like attacking the budget, it seems to me that we're losing focus from those pieces that we know need to be addressed. And now we're going to add a financial component to it as well, that, as Alderman Painter pointed out, it goes too far. So for that reason, I can't support an agenda initiative to go forward and do any study into disapproving their budget.
And just to clarify, you're suggesting we, as several have, we bring this back for discussion. We're not saying that we approve of Connect Transit's things. It's just with respect to just the budget.
I think we've identified issues that need study and further conversation and problem solving. And I want us to stay focused on those things without creating additional problems in the form of unknown delays with getting state funds that could possibly hurt our Connect Transit system overall.
Right. And obviously, it doesn't preclude us from bringing it back. Alderwoman Emig, and then Black and Crable.
Just for the record, I want to state what I do advocate for more specifically, which is diverse representation on our transit board. I think it's very wise to have a delay in any fare increases, as well as redressing the problems caused by the elimination of the olive route until the Connect Transit Working Group has finished their process and recommendations. And my understanding is they are even, in their first meeting, they are open to including more voices to the conversation. I think that the intergovernmental agreement is problematic. I hope that we can revisit it in the future and enumerate some of these policies so that there's less confusion. And I've become kind of a public transit junkie. If you're interested in this, I highly recommend Jarrett Walker's work, which was recommended by Strong Towns. And the first comment that he makes over and over again is, you have to decide as a community what your goals are for public transit. If you really value ridership, then you're going to make different policy and funding decisions. If you really value coverage, you're going to make different. Not you should do one or the other. And that typically a better question is, what's the ratio? And I believe that one of that information presented to us from Connect Transit, and I've spoken with just about everybody who will talk to me about this, is 60-40, 60 ridership, 40 coverage. Maybe it should be different. Maybe we should skew it higher for coverage. But then what does that mean for policy? What does that mean for cost? And how can we as a community participate in a conversation that will constructively get us to a place where we're doing better with Connect Transit? I mean, one of the findings in the municipal report was that 2.2% of our community uses Connect Transit. Almost 80%, we drive our cars. Is that what we want? And if so, then the conversation might shift a little bit. If we want more people to use Connect Transit and we want it to be better for our most vulnerable citizens, what is the best way to get there? And finally, I thought a lot about whether or not I would say this, but my brother-in-law is severely disabled. So personally, I understand how important this issue is and what it means to live on a fixed income and what it means to have to rely on city services. And and your public transportation is but one piece of a much more intricate, complicated puzzle about how we serve our community and our disabled citizens and our veterans. It's much larger than just this.
Okay. Alderman Black and Craybill, and then I guess that's about it.
I don't know if I can top that. That's
Yeah,
everything
I
you
was gonna say,
said.
that
Bravo.
pretty much,
I mean,
yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I guess from this point, what I'm hearing from this group, from the council, I kind of want to make sure there's some next steps here that acknowledge the folks that have come forward thus far. I have to be honest, I'm inspired when I see people who have never come to these meetings before speak up and share their perspective that has been not part of the conversation. So I want to honor that from our end. And I don't know if this is how we would do that, but perhaps next council meeting, I'm hearing three things from this group in the majority. Maybe it's a resolution that just says we don't want to see Connect Transit put these fare increases in place, starting with number one. Number two, we don't want to see the elimination of the olive route. And I've heard it many times, we absolutely need to reopen this intergovernmental agreement. It has to be reopened. It has to have rider representation, has to have disability advocates, and I want to see that in writing, in a vote, so we're crystal clear that we are not just kicking the can down the road or ignoring these topics. And to me, the only way to formalize that is through a resolution. I have to say that when we talk about priorities and making sure that fares don't increase, we can't just say that in a vacuum. And I'm comfortable spending more money towards Connect Transit to make sure that folks who are most needed, that need those services, are taken care of. But I think Normal needs to be involved in that as well. It can't be just Bloomington carrying the weight. And I don't know where they're at on this topic. So, however we would rig that up in some sort of a resolution next week, I would be full-throated support of.
Okay. Alderwoman Carrillo, sorry.
Yeah, I guess if I'm keeping the tally right, it doesn't sound like this is going to move forward. So I just want to acknowledge and commend the bus drivers, the riders, the nonprofit providers that have come through it. And, I've been taught that we listen to the people who are first and worst affected, that we center those people, that is how we bring justice into the world. So I'm sorry that we weren't able to do that today.
And just to clarify, as we go around, go to Alderwoman, Alderwoman Boland.
Oh.
Sorry.
Wake up. I just want to share a personal story. I live in Ward 2, obviously. In the reorganization of 2016 with the Connect Transit, they discontinued totally Ward 2. We have no bus service out there. Not that many people need it, but the large buses cannot get into the places that do need it. The high density, low income housing, the trailer parks, what have you. There's a tremendous amount of people that live out there that need the transportation. Main Street has the Aqua Branch that goes downtown. Silver Branch goes along 6 Points Road where those ditches are. and then goes, I don't know if it goes downtown or out to Walmart. That's the only service. Nothing comes in to the board. And nobody's, I don't know if people, I spoke up, but I don't know how many people else spoke up. But of course, it never, it didn't change. They just pulled it out. And Mark First has a house out on Fox Creek Road. So there's a lot of need, but it's not there. And I understand because it's out in the boonies, but.
Yeah.
I just wanted I can't really add anything to what everybody said, but I just wanted to thank Judy Buchanan, who's on the board, who stayed here to listen to everything. Really appreciate that.
Thanks. At this point, what I'm just going to do is if you'll, this is with just the respect of the proposal that Alderman Crabbe has put forward. If I could just have a yes, no, or a comment as to whether we bring that piece forward. That doesn't mean that there are not other pieces that we bring forward that I think some who spoke against bringing it forward are in favor of. So I don't think, for those of you that are here, this does not mean that we have not heard you. It just means there are many ways to get what is necessary. There are many ways to pursue social justice in this issue, and I think we are. And I see one of our board representatives saying yes, and and so I think we're going to continue to do this. And I believe there were some very specific things that Alderwoman Bray had mentioned. So if we could just go around very, very quickly, we're out of time, but like just yes, no.
No.
Yes.
Resolution next week.
Yes. No.
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 Resolution.
No to this resolution next week.
Okay, I think we all. I think we can work on a resolution. Yeah. For next week. I don't think that there was any disagreement in that. Okay, oh shoot, I just closed my agenda. At this point, all I need is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Wow, that was fast. Okay, moved by Alderwoman Painter, second by Alderwoman Carrillo. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
Thank you.